to see. I appreciate you haven't seen them yet, but I'm hoping that you'll have a chance to look at them today and tonight, and then we'll deal with that when we get on to Mr. Baker. But obviously you can't comment until you've seen them, I suspect.
I'm not committing anything at the moment. We'll see. There are two documents which have already been electronically sent, and I'm just wanting to make sure that you and others who want them have got hard copies. There are the up-to-date set of conditions as discussed between ourselves and Murray Council.
I don't recall seeing those, no. I know they were promised, but I don't think I've actually had them.
We have, in the next break, a copy for you of those. And do you have APP 21, 22, 23 hard copy? Well, but you have them anyway. Yeah, indeed, of course. You don't. If you want hard copies for reference purposes, we have them.
It would probably be even more convenient. I have them right in front of me, but if you've got them, I'll have them. Thank you.
I think it'd be helpful to get them out now in that case, and most will hand the conditions out at the same time. So there are people at the back of the hall. I recognise some of them, but not all. I therefore going to ask Dr. Mackenzie to read this recognition. I'll wait until this has happened. Very well, sir. Are we set? No, have you got a set for the reporter? We'll retrieve a set later. Thanks, sir. I call Dr. Mackenzie. Dr. Mackenzie, you have a precognition. We'll deal with supplementary points afterwards, but on the basis you describe your qualifications and experience, at least briefly, in Appendix A to your inquiry report, would you please read your precognition from paragraph 2.1 to the end, and I won't interrupt you. We'll then deal with questions.
Section 2, Summary of Inquiry Report. My second inquiry report, AR-MUC-IR2, which entirely supersedes that submitted previously, AR-MUC-IR1, CD 11.1, it presents background information on noise and noise assessment, together with a review of the way noise from wind farms is assessed, in line with national planning guidance and best practice. It discusses the revised noise assessment for the proposed development, reported in additional information, which assumes the existing Paul's Hill wind farm is operating at its consented noise limits. It should be noted that the additional information report also corrects the source noise levels used in the Paul's Hill 2 ES to represent the source noise level of the Paul's Hill 1 turbines as a matter of historical accuracy. It describes the new limits in the AI report derived from background noise measurements made in 2001 before the Paul's Hill 1 turbines were built, with the assessment showing these limits can be comfortably met by the proposed development. It provides a review of two reports from 2018 by Lateral Thought Engineering on noise levels and amplitude modulation from Paul's Hill 1, and the first inquiry report by David Baker of that company, which was mostly concerned with noise from PH1. Subsequent to a ruling by the reporter, any material submitted by Mr. Baker on noise from PH1 has been disregarded, except where that material has been used to attempt to discredit the noise prediction methodology used to assess noise from PH2. It makes general comments in respect of the objections raised by LTE, which are principally that operational noise from PH1 is above its permitted noise limit, meaning that no further development can be permitted. That because noise from pH1 is alleged to be greater than predicted, noise from pH2 will also be greater than predicted. With respect to that first point, the reporter has ruled that pH1 must be assumed to be operating at the limits specified by its planning consent. There is sufficient extra capacity in noise terms for pH2. And with respect to the second point, no clear comparison of predicted and measured noise from pH1 has been provided by Mr. Baker, and such allegations rely on unproven assumptions as to wind shear and its effect on propagation and background noise, which are discussed in the next section of my report, which is a review of the updated inquiry report submitted by David Baker. As with his first inquiry report, the majority of the later document is concerned with analysis of measured noise levels from Paul's Hill 1, which rely on largely unfounded assertions about wind shear. The purpose of this is to discredit the prescribed wind farm noise prediction methodology used for planning purposes. The following sections comprise a brief response to the various grounds discussed in his inquiry report and its review of the applicant's inquiry statement and updated noise assessment, with corresponding sections headings which I shall read out as I go. Ground 1 has been changed in the second inquiry report from the first inquiry report. I don't have the title written out here, but it continues that his allegations on noise at Corglass Farm require some explanation as follows. A relationship is created between background noise and 10-metre height wind speed, both at Corglass Farm, by choosing a very restricted data set when wind shears derived from LiDAR data is 0. And this is based on the assumption that for these shear conditions, wind speed at hub height on the site is the same as wind speed at 10 metres height at Corglass Farm, and that there will be no wind turbine noise contribution to this noise level at Corglass Farm. A second relationship is then derived between standardised 10-metre height wind speed at Paul's Hill 1 and background noise, that is non-turbine ambient noise, at Corglass Farm, which varies with wind shear. The assumed effect on wind shear, I'll read that again. The assumed effect of wind shear on background noise is shown as handwritten annotations in David Baker's inquiry report at figures 6 and at figures 13 to 17. And Mr. Baker concludes that anything above these derived or assumed background noise levels for given shear conditions is noise from Paul's Hill 1. There are a number of problems with this approach which depend on the untested assertions which essentially comprise the material of speculative research. It's of particular note that the high levels of wind shear to which Mr. Baker continually refers have not been found to occur at Paul's Hill 1, as shown in our document App 17. Mr. Baker appears to base his assumptions of these high levels of wind shear on evidence from other sites, the fact that wind turbine noise can be heard at Corglass Farm, and measured noise levels, and the fact that the measured noise levels don't conform to his assumed relationship between wind speed on site and background noise. He considers that the second compliance assessment report of October 2019, submitted to Moray Council as part of the noise investigation in respect of Paul's Hill 1, confirms his theories on wind shear, rather than accepting that this report provides the clear indication of excess noise, which is what happens when the stall-regulated turbines are forced to operate at low rotational speed in high wind speed conditions, which is what has been found to occur at such times at Paul's Hill 1. On ground 2, lack of headroom, I addressed this in my first inquiry report, at paragraph 10.7, and I don't repeat it here. Ground 3 is the effect of taller turbines on noise generation and propagation, and similarly I addressed this in my previous inquiry report and I don't repeat it again. Ground 4 is the failure of the standard noise prediction methods. The evidence that the ISO 9613 Part 2 prediction methodology fails appears to be justified only by reference to the analysis presented under Ground 1, which I discussed just now. The use of ISO 9613 has been repeatedly shown to be wholly fit for purpose, providing the correct input parameters are used, and hence the recommendation as to its use in the Institute of Acoustics Good Practice Guide. Neither the work of Oland, which he refers to, or Hanna, which he also refers to, contain any references to predictions carried out using ISO 9613 Part 2 and comparisons with measured data. The Oland work refers to expected values based on turbine test report data, spherical spreading and atmospheric attenuation, which shows only an approximate 2 dB increase in average under prediction as sound speed gradient, that's a combination of wind shear and temperature inversion effects, increases from 0 at one of the sites studied. This is in stark contrast to the high levels of noise increase due to wind shear claimed by Mr. Baker. The 3 dB discrepancy between expected and measured noise level at both sites for 0 sound speed gradient can be explained by a combination of the completely absorbent ground assumption combined with manufacturer's test report data rather than the actual recommendations in the IOA Good Practice Guide on the use of ISO 9613 and warranted on data with uncertainty added. Using the Good Practice Guide implementation of ISO 9613 would give predicted noise levels more than 3 dB higher than those presented as expected in the Oland text and therefore above the measured levels for 0 sound speed gradient. Ground 5 is unacceptability due to height, setback distance and claimed existing exceedance, which I cover elsewhere in my precognition. Failure of ETSU, Ground 6, failure of ETSU to consider character or spectral effects. I addressed that in my inquiry report and paragraphs 10.11 and 10.13, and I don't repeat it in my precognition. Ground 7 is the failure of the IOA Good Practice Guide and supplementary guidance, which I also address in my inquiry reports and not in my precognition. Ground 8 is the failure of the noise consultant, which is ourselves retained by the applicant, and this section only covers compliance measurements, which I do not propose to cover for reasons expressed elsewhere, except to strongly object to the allegation that Hayes Mackenzie, that's my company, failed utterly to do their job properly in the latest noise compliance assessment of 4th of October 2019. What Hayes Mackenzie did was to explore the data for non-normal operation of the Paul's Hill 1 site, which is unusual as this would usually be excluded as likely to produce lower noise levels, and we found significantly higher noise levels corresponding to grid curtailment periods, with the reasons for this identified at paragraph 3.5 above, which I've just read out, and followed up with the original turbine supplier to find a solution. The issue of the 2001 baseline data is covered in my inquiry report. The applicant's inquiry statement and updated noise assessment. The first 4 elements of this are covered in my inquiry report at paragraphs 10.19 to 10.24. Additional material wind direction is included at APP 17. This demonstrates a fault with the 40-metre height direction sensor during the noise measurements. The 20-metre height sensor clearly shows wind direction as being predominantly from westerly directions, including the downwind directions from Paul's Hill 1 and Paul's Hill 2, noted at Mr. Baker's inquiry report as being 190 to 316 degrees. There are, however, 2 additional sections. Section 13.5 is entitled Proposed Noise Levels Are Not in Accordance with Scottish SGP, Scottish Guidance. Have I got that the wrong way around? Scottish Government Policy. This concerns whether or not PH2 should be considered in planning terms as an extension to, and therefore part of, Paul's Hill 1. The position is that this application is an extension to the existing turbines for the purposes of the 1989 Electricity Act. If the application is approved, it will need a separate consent and deemed planning permission. Section 13.6 is entitled Comments on the Updated Noise Assessment, which presents no material which isn't addressed elsewhere, although there is still some confusion between the lower limiting value, which I call the LLV in the ETSU R97 noise limits, and the alternative ETSU R97 simplified noise limit. In addition, although there is no reason that the 43 DBL90 LLV should not be used here for the night limits, the applicant has not proposed this as part of the limits. Furthermore, the ETSU R97 noise limits are designed for rural areas, and there is nothing in ETSU R97 which says that the simplified limit should be used at any such location, except for those sites which are sufficiently small or remote that limits based on background noise level are not required. The majority of David Baker's inquiry report is concerned with noise from Paul's Hill 1. This is the conclusion, sorry, I should say. The majority of his report is concerned with noise from Paul's Hill 1, which is only relevant in respect of the extent to which it demonstrates failures of the prediction methodology used for the assessment of noise from Paul's Hill 2. Such failures are alleged in David Baker's inquiry report do not stand up to scrutiny for the following reasons. They depend in part on an assumed relationship between wind speed at hub height and background noise at 10 metres height at Corglass Farm, which is based on a very narrow data set and does not take into account the significant distance between the two or any of the other many factors which can affect background noise. The levels of wind shear alleged to occur at the site in David Baker's inquiry report have not been found using LiDAR technology, which has a proven track record for ground-based measurements of wind speed at height. The increase in noise due to wind shear is not borne out by the references quoted in his inquiry report. Noise measurements closer to the Paul's Hill 1 wind farm demonstrate measured levels of noise to be at the level of that predicted for normal turbine operation and a standard 10-metre height wind speed of 10 metres per second. Significantly higher levels of turbine noise were found to occur when some turbines were constrained to operate at low rotational speed under high incoming wind conditions, which could be expected for the type of turbine installed at Paul's Hill 1. A solution to this problem has been found. Different turbine technology will be used at the proposed Paul's Hill 2 site. Other issues raised include the extent to which headroom is available for Paul's Hill 2, which, provided the relevant ETSU R97 noise limits are used and which are wholly justified for this scheme, is demonstrated to clearly exist here, as explained in my inquiry report. Much is made of the failure of ETSU R97 to consider elements of noise character, but the fact remains that ETSU R97 is the accepted methodology in Scottish planning guidance for assessment of wind farm noise. Finally, the way the UK Institute of Acoustics Good Practice Guide to the use of ETSU R97, as referred to in Scottish planning guidance on wind farms, deals with wind shear, as criticised by Mr Baker, is fully explained and justified in my inquiry report. I have shown that there is ample capacity in noise terms for the proposed development and that the concerns raised about the noise prediction methodology in particular and the ETSU R97 approach to assessment is general are wholly without justification.
Thank you, Dr. Mackenzie. Some supplementary questions. For those who want to get our hard copy documents, the documents that people might usefully get out in advance CD 111, which is the additional information published in July 2019. CD 2, which is the Institute of Acoustics Good Practice Guide to ETSU. 7.3, which is the April 2019 compliance report by Hayes Mackenzie. There's 7.5, which I can't remember what it is. It's the Institute of Acoustics Bulletin of March 2009. There's CD 7.7, which is ISO 9613, 7.8, an article by Evans and Cooper. 7.17, which are the 2001 background noise measurements. 7.20, which is ETSU, and I mean the full version of ETSU, not the abbreviated version, which is CD1. 7.21, which is the October 2019 compliance report. APP 17, some wind data results. APP 21, which concerns the standardization of hub height to V10 on site. And then there's DB2, which I've lost. here we are, which is an article by Dick Bowdler, Wind Shear and its Effect on Noise Assessment. There's DB6. I'm not sure we need DB6, in fact. There'll be DB12, which is the Oland study. Going backwards, DB7. No, needn't get out DB7 either. That's just a reference. We won't need it. And there's DB22, which is the Vandenberg 2006 report or article or study. 22. DB22. Yep, that's it. So people have those documents to one side. That would be helpful. Dr. Mackenzie, I want to start with your experience and expertise. I believe that you are a fellow of the Institute of Acoustics. How do you become a fellow of the Institute? What's required?
You have to apply to the, assuming normal corporate membership, you then have to apply to the IOA membership committee. That requires a proposer and 2 seconders who are prepared to verify that the applicant, that's me in this case, has made a significant contribution to acoustics or to the profession of acoustics. That's then considered by the membership committee with final approval given by IOA Council.
When did you become a fellow?
In around 2009, I think.
Okay. And how long have you and your firm been working in the field of wind turbines and acoustics?
We set up Hayes Mackenzie specifically in 1991 to provide advice on noise from wind turbines, and that was at the time of the first applications for commercial wind turbines were being received.
How many cases have you advised on since then, in total, roughly?
We've been involved with over 1,000 wind farm noise sites in the UK and further afield. I've given evidence at about 70 inquiries and
so is that 70?
70 inquiries and some hearings as well.
And do you always work for wind energy developers?
Well, we aim to provide impartial advice. The majority of our clients are wind energy developers. We've also worked for a number of planning authorities, including Angus Council and North Lanarkshire Council, where we appeared against Scottish Power in Scotland, and around 10 local authorities in England and Wales, including one as part of a High Court challenge, in some cases providing advice on all wind turbine applications received by one council in the southwest.
And have you also provided advice to the UK government?
We've provided various reports to the UK government, including one in 2011, looking at how ETSU was being used to inform planning applications, and one on the issue of infrasound in 2006, which actually identified or highlighted the issue of amplitude modulation, which we'll be coming on to, I'm sure, later today, and one for the Irish EPA on the assessment of wind turbine noise from their licensed sites.
I want to turn to the issue of wind shear, which is, we're responding to what Mr. Baker says, but at various points in his inquiry report. I'm not going to try and identify specific paragraphs. I think it's a response rather than just adding to our evidence. I want to tackle first the issue of the standardisation of hub height wind speed to V10 on site. V10 standardisation, I'll abbreviate it to. Let's go back in time, first of all, to where this started, so we can see some logic. I think in Appendix A to ETSU, which we needn't go to at CD 720, there are a number of then examples in 1995-6, whenever we did it, of wind farms in operation and the conditions which apply to wind farms. Have you just reviewed those to find out what the hub heights of those wind farms, wind turbines at those wind farms were?
Yes, there are about 10 wind farms listed, I think, in Appendix A of ETSU. And some of them specify what the hub heights of the turbines are within the planning conditions which are reproduced there. They don't all, but it's possible to find out using the internet what the hub heights were at the time of those turbines. And I can confirm that the hub heights of those turbines are between 25 metres and 35 metres. The average is around about 30 metres, I would say.
So that at that time, lead you to this extent that the practice was to use a reference height of 10 metres on site, V10,
Yes.
and therefore the difference between V10 and V25-35 was whatever it was.
Yes, sure. Yes.
What's happened since then?
Well, since then, clearly turbine noise has increased considerably. We're now looking at Paul's Hill 1, which was 2003, I think it was commissioned, has a hub height of 59 metres. We're currently looking at an application for a site with hub heights of 93 metres.
And what's the effect of that in terms of wind shear?
Well, essentially, it's not possible to predict what the wind speed at the turbine hub height, which is what controls the noise output from the turbine, without considering atmospheric conditions in considerable detail.
And I think there was the 2009 Acoustics Bulletin article explored this issue. We needn't go there, but it's there to look at.
Yes.
I haven't got a CD reference, but I gave it just now. But that this issue ultimately led to the Institute of Acoustics publishing its good practice guidance in May 2013.
Yes, that was one of the issues. I mean, the report I referred to from 2011 looked at how ETSU was being used and how essentially it could be improved and updated, and that led to the good practice guide. And one of the things that the good practice guide considered was how to account for wind shear in wind turbine noise assessment as prescribed by ETSU.
Just now, I think you were talking about turbine noise increasing with, I think you meant turbine hub height increasing?
Did I say the wrong? Yes, okay.
I think you may have said
Yes.
with turbine height increasing, the wind shear
Yes.
issue becomes more accentuated.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
All right, I understand. Thank you. So why then is it the practice to refer noise levels to a standardised 10-metre height wind speed?
That's quite a confusing issue, and was part of the reason that ETSU referred to 10-metre height wind speed in the first place. Manufacturers are apt to refer to wind speed at 10 metres height in describing the sound power levels from turbines. It's always the case that what they actually mean is hub height wind speed. What they mean by this is hub height wind speed converted to 10 metres height by a completely artificial and arbitrary conversion factor. And what I need to do is explain that this V10 standardised wind speed is actually the same as hub height wind speed insofar as the relationship between turbine noise and background noise is concerned, as shown in APP 21.
Sorry, my
I thought
microphone
I had my
wasn't on.
documents terribly well organised, and now I can't track down APP 21.
Well, there's a spare copy if you want it.
No, I will find it. I've got it now. It's fine.
Thank you very much. If you go to page 1 of 3 and just, I think just read that first page.
Okay. The figures, which I'll reproduce here, are those in Hayes Mackenzie's updated noise assessment of the 9th of July 2019, provided as additional information. The first two figures, 3 and 4, are presented exactly as they were in the AI document, with noise levels referenced to standardised 10-metre height wind speed. The second two figures, which I've labelled figures 3HH and 4HH, are presented with noise levels referenced to hub height wind speed. It can be seen that although the plotted data changes with reference to the numbers on the wind speed axis, the relationship between the background noise, the noise limits, and the predicted turbine noise doesn't change. Just by way of explanation, the figures show the remaining noise budget, assuming Paul's Hill 1 operating at its consented noise limit with two alternative lower limiting values applied to the total available ETSU R97 noise limits.
So if we then go to the figures, and it doesn't really matter which we go to, let's go to the nighttime figures, figure 3 and then figure 3HH. Perhaps you just take the reporter through what we see to make the point you want to make.
Well, okay, this figure shows the nighttime noise limit for Paul's Hill 2, that's the green line. The nighttime limit for Paul's Hill 2, assuming a 38 lower limiting value applied to the ETSU R97 total available noise limits. It shows the Paul's Hill 2 predicted noise level. It shows the nighttime prevailing background noise level, which is as derived from the 2011 measurements. And it also describes an additional contribution from Berryburn and Clashgower wind farms. And essentially, if you flip between figure 3 and figure 3HH, you will see that the relationship between all those lines remains constant, although they move slightly to the right on the scale at the bottom. So, for instance, it's not easy to look at the conversion, but a standardised 10-metre height wind speed of 6 metres per second becomes a hub height wind speed of 8.5 metres per second. That's where the kink in the Berryburn and Clashgower predicted noise level curves is.
On the x-axis, it shifts to the right if you use hub height wind speed as opposed to standardised wind speed. The relationship between the various matters being examined remains the same.
That's correct.
And therefore, when you standardise, you are still looking at hub height wind speed.
Essentially, yes. It would be more convenient if everything referred to hub height wind speed. But the reason that the standard V10 wind speed is used is because previous versions of IE 61400 Part 11, that's document DB6, Mr. Baker's documents, required that conversion to be carried out. And even the latest version, which is edition 3, this has been an evolving document, that requires that information to be presented alongside that reference to hub height wind speed. So this is still done for historical reasons. And
IEC 6140011 relates to the determination of source noise, doesn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, okay.
That's right. It's a very comprehensive document and very particular.
And I think you've referred us. Well, we've got out DB22, which is an article by Fritz van den Berg. Is that right? That's
right, yes.
Who is Fritz van den Berg?
Fritz van den Berg first identified the need to reference wind turbine noise and background noise to the same wind speed measurement height, because what was done before, essentially because of what ETSU said, was referencing background noise to 10 metres height wind speed, referencing turbine noise to standardised 10-metre height wind speed, which meant that the comparison wasn't being done on a like-for-like basis, and in some applications it was being completely ignored, which meant that predicted turbine noise was being presented as significantly below the noise limits, whereas in practice, depending on the exact circumstances of the site, it would exceed it, and it would exceed it when compliance measurements were carried out.
Page 149 of the van den Berg article entitled "The Sound of High Winds."
I've got that here.
The epilogue.
Yes.
Can you take us to what you want the reporter to note?
Well, I think it's quite good because it's essentially Fritz van den Berg saying the way he felt that this problem could be dealt with, and near the bottom of this, and it's difficult to read in Mr. Baker's copy because it's got squares between every word, but I'll try and read it out. It says, Paul Botha.
Well, just tell us where you are, first of all.
Sorry,
it's about 7 lines from the bottom of page.
About 2/3 of the way down.
Yeah.
it says Paul Botha 2005 on the right-hand side. Do you have that? Okay. Paul Botha 2005 proposed to do away with 10-metre wind velocities entirely and relate background sound directly to hub height wind velocity. This is a sensible idea as it relates to two factors that are most relevant, the wind turbine sound and ambient sound, without an intermediate variable, which is the 10-metre wind velocity.
Fritz van den Berg was a bit of a prophet in the wilderness at that stage, but what he said came good was that it was later adopted. Would it be fair to say that in the UK there was a bit of a learning process about wind shear post-ETSU?
There was. I spent many hours banging my head on the walls explaining to developers why we could no longer measure at 10 metres height, and it's still the case with some people that we have because it's clearly much more expensive for developers to measure at hub height wind speed, or something which allows us to derive the hub height wind speed.
Okay, that's why we do it. And this process then, does it distort matters, or does it enable turbine noise as predicted at a receptor to be compared with background noise as measured at that receptor under the same conditions of operation?
Yes, that's correct. It means that essentially turbine noise, as predicted, is compared with the range of background noise levels which are experienced for those exact same conditions as measured at the receptor under the same conditions of operation. So it's a completely meaningful process. We're looking at what the turbine noise level is and what the variation in background noise level is for that level of turbine noise. And wind shear does not need to come into it.
And to illustrate because it's an important topic, I think, the alternative, what happens if you do try to use V10 measured wind speed? If we go to DB2,
yes,
which is an article by Dick Bowdler, whose presence we are graced with today, I think, in this room. If we go to page 3 of that article at figure 2, tell us what you see and what the point you want to make.
Well, to make a meaningful comparison, wind speed is measured at 10 metres height. You need to make a meaningful comparison, what the wind be at the turbine height for that requires knowledge of the increase in wind speed with height, which is what wind shear is, to enable the wind speed at turbine hub height to be calculated, to know how to predict the noise from the turbines for those conditions. And that's quite usefully illustrated in figure 2 of Mr. Bowdler's report, which is DB2. Do you have figure 2? Yeah. It's the second page. Well, it's on the second page in.
Make sure you explain the red curve and the black curve, what they are.
Mr. Trinick, I shall do that. So you can see what this graph shows, and it's what the graphs that we've been producing for nearly 30 years. It shows background noise on the axis up the side, the y-axis, and 10-metre height wind speed on the x-axis across the bottom. And each of those blue diamond points are measurements of background noise, and it's plotted against the corresponding 10-metre height wind speed where they occur. Sorry, I just need to explain so we all know what we need to make sure I explain fully so everybody understands what this is, because these plots can be confusing, but I think that once we explain it, we know what's going on. And then, as specified by ETSU, the best fit curve is fitted through all that data, which defines the prevailing background noise level. Now, what Mr. Bowdler has plotted on here is the turbine noise as it varies with wind speed. But without knowing what the wind shear is, you don't know where that noise curve is. It can move to the left for higher wind shear, or it can move to the right for lower wind shear. In fact, it's continually that red curve on there is continually moving from right to left, depending on what the wind shear is for each of those 10-minute periods. So each of those blue curves each of those blue dots doesn't have a specific wind turbine noise curve associated with it. Well, has its own, if you like, wind turbine noise curve associated with it. But each of them has a separate one. So for each of those blue dots, there's a blur of red curves as it goes backwards and forwards across the page. Now, I don't think, as an engineer, that that's an appropriate way to do any kind of assessment. In order to use 10-metre height wind speed, we'd have to define what the wind shear would be for the site. Let's say it's 0.4 or it's 0.3 or it's 0.2, which would put that curve, which would fix it somewhere on that line. But there's no specific way of defining what an appropriate level of wind shear is. And you could, I guess, always argue that a worst case would be to shift that curve completely over to the left. But that would mean that there'd be no sense in carrying out background noise measurements, when the whole point of the ETSU methodology is to compare turbine levels. So essentially, by saying, well, we're just going to assume a worst case wind shear, what that means is we're just going to compare with a fixed limit, which isn't the intention of ETSU. Sorry to labour that point, but I think it's important.
I understand. And thus the V10 standardisation. So I think we've explained that point. I want to go on to background noise now, and responding to what Mr. Baker has to say about the contribution of wind shear to background noise in sort of pages 45 to 67 of his inquiry report. First of all, in a rural location, well, such as Cordlass Farm, what makes up background noise? What are the contributors to background noise?
Well, Cordlass Farm has no proximity to any roads of any significance, apart from the access track. So there is no noise from road traffic, which is normally the principal source of background noise anywhere in the UK. So for wind turbine noise assessment in rural areas, the background noise is largely generated by wind in surrounding trees and foliage. If I can define what background noise is, because we may need to come on to that later. Background noise is expressed as the
take
noise
it a
level.
bit more slowly. Slow down.
Background noise is defined as the noise level in any measurement period as the level exceeded for 90% of it. So it's the kind of lowest noise level occurring in that measurement period. So at Cordlass Farm or at similar locations, it's largely generated by wind in surrounding trees and foliage, but there may be an effect of local water courses, which would be more or less significant depending on proximity. So that will set a bottom level, if you like, for the background noise. Mm-hmm. So where background noise is only generated by wind effects, it can still vary significantly, and there's no fixed relationship between wind speed at 10 metres height and background noise. I wish there was, because if that was the case, we wouldn't have spent the last 30 years measuring background noise from wind farm sites or prior to wind farm sites being built.
Take it more slowly. So in those circumstances, what does wind-generated background noise depend upon?
Well, it depends on many factors, hence the need to carry out the measurements. It depends on wind direction, depends on turbulence, depends on the amount of gusting in the wind. It depends on the variation in local wind speed and the way it stimulates different sources, such as different trees, both near and far to the measurement location. The way it stimulates wind around buildings, structures in the garden where the measurements are being carried out. So the amount of shielding from different buildings is significant, and there may be other factors. We never see a completely fixed relationship. There's always a spread of data. So,
yes, carry on.
Mr. Baker's analysis is predicated on a fixed relationship between background noise at Cordlass Farm and wind speed at 59 metres height on Pools Hill 1, based on some mathematical manipulation and an assumed relationship between background noise and 10 metre height wind speed, which only depends on wind shear. So I think you can see that as figure 5 in his inquiry report, where he has some assumed background noise curves, the slope of which depend on wind shear. And this doesn't take into account any of the factors that I mentioned, nor, particularly, it doesn't take account of the 2.4 kilometres approximately separation distance between Cordglass Farm and Paul's Hill 1, nor, in fact, the distance in ground level height between them.
Okay, just stop there a minute. I'm looking for one reference. Never mind. We'll do without the reference. The point I just wanted to draw out is that, therefore, where background noise is really only generated by wind effects, not by trees and foliage, not by local watercourses, you will still find the need to derive a background noise curve through a scatter of data.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. I didn't do. That's fine. Let's turn to wind turbine noise at a receptor such as Cordglass Farm. We're really pursuing the same topic here of what Mr. Baker says about wind shear. In order to determine the noise received from a wind turbine at, say, Cordglass Farm, where do you start?
The first thing we need to do is to quantify the source noise with respect to wind speed at the hub height of the turbine. And that's done through a prescriptive test procedure laid down in IC 61400 Part 11, which is dB6. And wind shear plays no part in this. As I've explained, all that we need to know is the hub height wind speed, because that's what controls the noise emitted by the turbines.
Having determined, I'm looking at a pathway here, obviously. You start at the start of the path is the source noise.
Yes.
That source noise then propagates.
Yes, that's correct.
And for normal downwind propagation, could you explain how wind shear then plays a part?
Well, normal downwind propagation, which is what we always assess for a planning assessment, which is the worst case noise condition, and also for any compliance assessment, which I know we're not discussing here, but that's the case for that, where we need to look at the worst case propagation of noise from source to receiver. Wind speed increases with height, which is wind shear, causing downwind bending of the sound waves. And I think that's quite usefully illustrated on
DB7.
DB7.
So we go to DB7.
DB7 is some observations on sound propagation in the atmosphere. The majority of it is to do with temperature effects, but the front page essentially shows how noise propagates from source to receiver. It shows a direct path, number 1 in this case, which goes through the trees, and it shows what you might call an indirect path, which is path 2, which goes up and then curves down again, and that's the effect of wind shear, and that's normal downwind propagation. The converse is that for upwind propagation, the path curves upwards and reduces noise, but that's what we assess as the default position
of downwind propagation.
But there were some claims made by Mr. Baker that increasing wind shear, which means increasing the wind speed up with height, causes a change to noise propagation. But there's no evidence. There's plenty of people who've been looking into it, but there's no evidence that increasing wind shear causes increased noise propagation from source to receiver. We have the same downwind bending effect.
While you've got DB7 in front of you, just illustrating one further point, is looking at that figure 34.
Yeah.
If you increase the source height, what happens?
Well, if you increase the source height, the bending of the sound wave actually takes the bent curve further away from the receiver location. You can see that if you kept that, it's a very simplistic explanation. But I think you'll see that if you actually raised the source height and kept the same radius of curvature on that curve too would actually miss the receiver location. I'm not saying there aren't other curves, but I think that illustrates why lifting a source up actually reduces the effect of wind shear. For instance, if you look at propagation of aircraft noise, wind shear, the direction of propagation doesn't need to be taken into account because it doesn't actually affect the propagation of noise from an aircraft because it is at such a height that the wind direction doesn't make any difference. You can observe that as you listen to aircraft,
okay.
for instance.
Thanks for that. Changing topics slightly, but continuing on our pathway of propagation to the receiver, Mr. Baker has criticised the use of ISO 9613 Part 2 as a predictive model. I think you want to respond to that.
Well, I do. There have been a number of studies carried out of appropriate prediction tools for wind turbine noise. And although there are lots of detailed models which give more detailed results, ISO 9613 as Part 2 has been repeatedly found to give appropriate predictions which are appropriate for assessing wind turbine noise at the planning stage because of its engineering nature, which means that it presents a broad brush acceptable level for predicting noise from wind farms. The Evans and Cooper study, which is quite comprehensive, was referred to in the drafting of the IOA Good Practice Guide, although it did highlight that where the land falls away significantly in front of a noise source and then curves up to a receiver location, that needs to be allowed for by what's called a concave ground propagation or a concave ground correction. So providing that is used, then it's held to give very good correlation with what happens in reality.
I think you've made many compliance measurements. What have those measurements told you about the accuracy of the ISO 9613 predictive model?
Well, that it's actually very good. Where you're able to determine what the wind turbine noise is at a receiver location, it gives very good results. We've carried out an extensive program of measurements at a number of wind farm sites, particularly in the southwest, and have found entirely that it gives good results.
I suppose someone might say, yes, as a southwest, we're talking about Cordlas Farm. Would there be any difference? Should there be any difference?
Shouldn't be any difference. There's the sites. One of the sites is flat. One of the sites is significantly undulating. We've also done measurements in various places in Scotland and found similar effects.
I think the IOA GPG, which there is CD72, we might go there actually, if you don't mind. Page 20. Don't start yet, I'm just looking up something else. No, it doesn't matter. Yeah, let's in fact start at page 18. I think paragraph 413 contains a discussion about the use of ISO 9613.
Yes.
And recommends its use.
Yeah.
That's 413, 414.
Yeah.
But then if we go to page 20, I think you wanted to just explain to the reporter what the GPG says about the use of the study in terms of the use of particular forms of noise data, source noise data.
Well, yes, there's a concern that using tested noise levels for wind turbine without using any applying any uncertainty to those values may underpredict noise, and so it specifies the types of source noise data which are appropriate for noise predictions for planning purposes. 4.3.6. So one of the options is to use warranted data, provided that includes an appropriate margin of uncertainty, which is what we did for Paul's Hill 2.
Yes. Now, just developing that theme, clearly the turbine for Paul's Hill 2 has not yet been selected. So in the EIA process, you use a candidate turbine, is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
So for the candidate turbine in this case, you used warranted data?
Yes.
And therefore you allowed what margin of uncertainty?
An additional 2 dB of
2 dB, thank you. Referring to this also because of the Olin study, which is DB12, which is referenced by Mr. Baker.
Right.
In that study, that was simply manufacturers' test reports
Yes,
we
that's
used?
right. Yes.
And therefore there was no allowance for uncertainty, they were just test reports?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Just continuing down our pathway towards Cordlas Farm, we're now there, and I want to get your observations on what part local wind shear and wind distribution may play in noise propagation. That is, increases in wind speed with height at the receptor as opposed to on site.
Well, I beg your pardon for interrupting. I don't understand the expression local wind shear, because...
That's fair enough. I meant wind shear at the receptor in this case. What part does that play in noise propagation?
Well, I think it might help Mr. Campbell if I explain further. If you measure wind speed at a low height, it will inevitably be affected or influenced by any trees or any other objects which are higher than the wind speed measurement height. So essentially the speed up or the wind speed conditions around the receptor location certainly shield the receptor from noise and from wind, for that matter. But they don't affect the way noise propagates across the topography between the source location and the receiver location. They just can't, because they're not there. They're in the garden of the receptor location. They can't affect noise propagation.
So these, sorry to use Mr. Campbell use the word local wind shear, that wasn't clear enough. But wind shear at the receptor location. Trying to phrase the question correctly, you're not really looking there at atmospheric effects,
No, that's
but
right.
at local effects of trees.
That's right. It's atmospheric effects that cause...
Whereas with ISO 9613, the propagation pathway is dependent on atmospheric effects.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Developing this one more stage, if you go to Mr. Baker's inquiry report at page 38. Page 38, he's dealing with a site in England, I think, called Winwick.
Yes.
And a study by, who was the study by? Cox and others, is that right?
It was a document put together by some people calling themselves the Independent Noise Working Group, who got some wind shear data from somewhere. I don't know.
And we also go to page 98 of the inquiry report,
Yeah, similar kind of data.
Whoa, don't go so fast. Page 98.
Yes. Oh, sorry, that's page 13. Sorry, I was looking at page 39.
Yeah.
Yes. Page 98.
98.
Yeah.
We have other material brought forward by Mr. Baker on the topic of wind shear. Is this a study by someone called Mr. Stigwood?
It is indeed, studied by Mr. Stigwood.
Yeah. And what was he studying there?
Well, he was looking at comparisons essentially between wind turbine noise and background noise, where background noise was a reference to 10-metre height wind speed, and he was showing the effects of applying different wind shear exponents. Although he was also comparing that to the same comparisons using the standardised, the IOA Good Practice Guide method, which, although it's referred to as the article method, which refers back to that document, the acoustics bulletin document. Yeah, that's right.
What is the relevance of this material to this inquiry?
Well, it really has no relevance to this inquiry because they are specific sites which aren't the site in question here. They're just illustrations of different effects of different levels of wind shear.
On a hypothetical or real basis?
Well, they're not compliance assessments. They are just the effects of carrying out an assessment in different ways, not compliance assessment, theoretical assessment based on some existing background noise data.
Before we move on, sir, I could do with a blast of hot air.
Yeah.
Well, at least the red thing on anyway. Do we need the sound as well as do they come together? Well, I'd love to stop Mr. Campbell hearing, but probably not.
Oh, that's better. Yes, good.
And we've still got the heat. This is good. This is good. I can bask. That's enough of that. We're changing topics. Mr. Baker makes various comments about Hayes Mackenzie, and in particular about your involvement with Paul's Hill 1. Can you just confirm to the inquiry the extent of your involvement in Paul's Hill 1?
Our only involvement with Paul's Hill 1, prior to carrying out the compliance measurements, was the background noise measurements in 2001. We had nothing to do with the preparation of the ES, and we didn't have anything to do with the turbine selection for the site itself.
And I think post-2001, for whatever reason, it wasn't complaint-related, I believe, but you made you monitored noise from Paul's Hill 1 in 2007, 2008,
yes,
briefly,
yes,
and then you came into play again, first of all with Paul's Hill 2, where you helped with the preparation of the ES, and you also made measurements connected with the concerns of Mr. and Mrs. Bonzio.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So far as I want to just turn briefly to the topic of audio data. When you made compliance measurements for Paul's Hill 1, did you generate audio recordings?
Yes, we always carry out, for compliance measurements, we always record 2 minutes of audio at the start of each 10 minutes of noise data, so we can listen to anything which seems anomalous.
And did you listen to the recordings from the PH1 compliance measurements?
We did. We obviously saw the results of the assessment, and we listened to the noise levels, the higher noise levels which occurred, anything above the planning limit. I'm not saying we listened to everything, we listened to samples, and heard that it was dominated by background noise. There may have been some elements of turbine noise at some times which were discernible, but essentially there was a significant contribution from background noise.
Slow down. And then when you tell us what happened then when you identified high levels of noise above the limit line. I mean, I think if you go to CD 21, is that a good starting point?
I think it is.
Yeah.
721, you mean?
If you go to page 19, I think within that you'll find figure 12. Is that where you want to go?
Yeah, that's where I'd like to go.
Also get out at the same time to stop people. It's the October 2019 compliance report. But if you also get out, please, APP 22 at the same time. We know what CD 721 is. It's the compliance report. What is APP 22?
That's a reproduction of figure 12 with grid curtailment points highlighted in blue to make them stand out essentially, and to show which are grid curtailment periods and which aren't.
So I'll ask you to explain it in a minute, but just so we identify what's what. The figure 12 is the same figure 12, except that the grey dots in 721 have become, in some part, and I'll ask you to explain, as blue dots in APP 22. They're the same position of the dots.
Yeah, that's right.
That's fine. There's no new data there.
No.
Right. So explain how you identify these high levels of noise and what pathway you followed from there.
Well, we're constantly looking at our data to find out what's going on, and one of the things which we did was to, instead of looking at data under normal operational conditions, which is our sort of de facto position, which is we need to assess wind turbine noise with all the turbines operating normally. It was my colleague, Mr. Shepherd, who took it upon himself to look at all the data which we got from turbine operation, and he identified these high-level noise data which didn't fit the general pattern, which was quite surprising. This is at a location which is quite close to the wind farm site, about 600 metres away. So we were fairly confident that most of that noise was going to be turbine noise. So we saw these high-level points, and our first thought, or my first thought, at least seeing it, was maybe there's been some increase in background noise. Maybe somebody to do with some process has put a generator in somewhere, and it's causing high levels of noise. So the next thing we did was to listen to the noise recordings to find out what was going on. And we were quite astonished to find out that it was turbine noise, which we're used to listening for and identifying, and there was no question that it was high levels of turbine noise. So we went through the data from the wind farm site to find out what was going on during those measurement periods, and we established that it all corresponded to periods of what were noted as being grid curtailment, which we didn't really understand what grid curtailment consisted of at that time, other than that it was a restricted operation of the turbines. And following our analysis, we identified that some of the turbines, these twin-speed stall-regulated turbines, were being run in low-speed mode. And
at the time that you identified this wind turbine noise, I think you had been given to understand by those instructing you that there was a particular sort of turbine on the site.
Well, yes.
But you were then informed that actually what was there was a stall-regulated turbine.
Yes, we knew by that point, because this was after the revised AI had gone in with the new assumption as to turbine noise. So we discovered that some turbines were being run in low speed mode, which means they rotate slow. They're essentially the turbines that Paul Hill run are twin speed turbines. And they're stall regulated turbines, which means that they have two operational speeds. They rotate at one speed or a significantly faster speed. Modern turbines are variable speed turbines. They gradually increase in rotational speed as the incoming wind increases until they get to rated power, and then they stop going any faster, which means that the noise is essentially constant. Stall regulated turbines, they increase in output power up to a certain point, and then the noise level continues to rise because of the stall regulation, which generates extra levels of noise. So these turbines were being run at an inappropriate wind speed for their rotational speed, and as a result were generating high levels of noise. And that is precisely the mechanism which was causing these high levels of noise. This has been disputed by Mr. Baker. This was a cause of the high levels of noise. So we just simply tagged, if you will, the high levels of noise points on figure 12 in CD 7.21 with blue, just to show which of those data points corresponds to grid curtailment. So you see that all the high level noise points are essentially blue, and some of the blue points admittedly are amongst the grey points, but we don't know. It depends on the wind speed which these twin speed turbines are operated at, the incoming wind speed for those conditions of operation. So there'll be a greater or lesser extent of excess noise depending on the exact operating conditions at the exact turbines.
If you go to APP 23, we're not dealing with Paul's Hill 1 compliances inquiry, so I'm just going to ask you to refer briefly to APP 23,
which is
the letter from Fred Olsen Renewables, 12th November, to the EHO. And I'm only going to ask you to refer to it briefly because, on the reporter's ruling, we are not dealing with compliance issues at this inquiry. And in short, I think I will lead you on this. This letter says, this is what we found, this is what we've done to put it right.
Yes.
And would you like to confirm you accept that? I don't think there's a reply to that letter yet. I wouldn't expect one yet, but that's a state of play, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. I just want to move on to one other aspect of isolating wind turbine noise in a compliance analysis, because it is relevant to Paul's Hill too. You made compliance measurements which led to an April 2019 report, which is CDC something, 7.3. And you reported, or you found, and it doesn't really matter which, that it was difficult when measuring at Cordlas Farm to isolate wind turbine noise. You couldn't report conclusively on the complaint.
That's correct.
And I think in discussion with Mr. Caldwell, the EHO at Murray Council, he said, I want you to do more, quite rightly. Yeah. And so what you did was to select a measurement point away from Cordlas Farm, and that's resulted in the October 2019 compliance report.
That's correct.
Why was it that it was difficult to isolate turbine noise when measuring at Cordlas Farm?
Well, essentially, it's because of the distance of Cordlas Farm from the Paul's Hill 1 wind turbines, which is approximately 2.4 kilometres, I think. The significant distance means that the noise levels at Cordlas Farms are actually quite low, around 35 dB, but they are at that level below the level of background noise. So reference to our 2001 measurement data shows that there's a significant amount of background noise at levels above the expected levels for noise from Paul's Hill 1. So essentially, it wasn't possible to determine the noise at Courtgrass Farm from Paul's Hill 1 with any degree of confidence at all. The shutdown data, the turbines were shut down, but they were, appears from both our own analysis and Mr. Baker's analysis that they were uncharacteristically low levels of background noise, so they occurred under very specific conditions. So we discussed with Mr. Caldwell at Moray Council, and we referred to the Good Practice Guide. And the Good Practice Guide, which we can probably usefully refer to...
Let's go to the...
Supplementary Guidance Note 5.
It's CD 72, but it's the supplementary guidance notes which come after the main report.
That's right.
And you want supplementary guidance note 5, which is entitled Post-Completion Measurements.
That's right. So if we
Now, hold on, it's just finding it.
Yeah.
I think you want to go to page 8, is that right?
That's right. Page 8, towards the back. Paragraph 2.4.8.
Are you there, sir?
Yeah.
Well, start at 2.4.6, would you? What does that advise?
Okay. This is in advising on the procedure to be followed for compliance measurements. And 2.4.6 says, it is envisaged in the structure of the sample planning condition included at Annex B of the Good Practice Guide that measurements are first carried out without any turbine shutdown, and that such shutdowns are only required if necessary to demonstrate compliance with the limits. In practice, however, it may be preferable to include shutdowns as routine from the start of the measurements, as this may speed up compliance determination.
Okay, that's just to set the scene. We go on to 248. And would you take us to the relevant parts of that so far as your Paul's Hill 1 compliance measurement campaign is concerned?
Yeah, I think I'd just like to go to the bottom of that. About 2/3 of the way down, there's a sentence which starts on the right-hand side of the page. I'll just count the lines up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 lines up. There's a sentence which starts on the right-hand side. Yeah.
Page 8.
Yeah. Page 8. Yeah. Sentence starting, in the event that typical background noise level is greater than the turbine noise limit, which we can see it is, and if the additional contribution of the turbine noise to the prevailing background is difficult to discern with confidence from the data, then it's likely that compliance with the ETSU R97 limits would be demonstrated. And then it goes on and it says, in such cases where noise limits are less than the ETSU R97 limits, and it says, e.g. apportionment of noise impacts, which is where we have to have lower noise limits. But it also says compliance measurements may need to be undertaken in closer proximity to the wind farm to ensure background noise levels do not unduly influence the readings. And this may also be significant when determining compliance with planning limits, such as the ETSU R95 simplified limit of 35 dB L90, since background noise is likely to be around this level or higher when the turbine reaches a rated power, except under exceptional circumstances. So that's what we did. We measured at two closer locations, in fact, and of which location one, which was referred to in the discussion about curtailment earlier, was at about 600 metres from the wind farm. And in fact, there are very few trees at this location, so there was very little effective background noise.
And you were able to isolate the turbine
We were
noise?
clearly able to isolate the turbine noise.
That's fine.
Improve the signal-to-noise ratio, as we call it, considerably.
Let's turn to almost the final topic, which is background noise measurements made in 2001. And we know that Mr. Baker takes issue with them generally and your use of them.
Yeah.
I want you to go to CD 717, figure 2. 717 is your background noise report from 2001. Just wait a minute. You get turn to something else. Yep. One of the comments made by Mr. Baker was that you selected a location unduly affected by noise within trees. I think you want to comment on that.
Well, yeah, I found that strange. I did install the equipment myself. I remember going to the house and putting the equipment in, and I had no difficulty in determining an appropriate measurement location. I had no problems with finding a place that wasn't unduly affected by trees, and that was the location we decided upon to represent amenity.
That's figure 2 photographs, I think.
Figure 2 in there.
You got them.
I don't recall the exact discussion with Mr. Bonzio at the time, but I know I met him and installed the equipment as shown in that location.
I see there's some snow on the ground. What effect would that have?
Well, that always reduces background noise from more distant locations, clearly, because it absorbs noise.
Thank you. If you go to Mr. Baker's inquiry report at page 110, also get out 2 further documents for this purpose. One is the additional information, CD 111. For those who've got hard copies, it's figure 1 within that.
CD 111. Yeah, I'm getting there.
That's all right.
When you call the CD numbers,
It's the additional information of July 2019. And also CD 73, which is the April 2019 compliance report. At figure 12. Yes, I'm pretty sure it's figure 12. You may correct me on that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It is figure 12. Okay. So if you put those 2 documents side by side, so you've got figure 1 from the July 19 AI. And you've got figure 12 from the April 2019 report, noting that figure 1 represents all background noise, doesn't it? Because those are the background noise plots from 2001.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And the figure 12 are the compliance measurements, so entirely separate data.
Yeah.
And the grey dots are all noise. and the red dots are shutdown noise. Is that
Yes,
right?
That's right.
What point do you want to make?
Well, if we ignore the very low level red dots, which Mr. Baker says are down to high levels of wind shear at the site, we ignore those very low levels, and then all the other red dots which we see there fall within the general spread of data on Figure 1 of the updated noise assessment, which is the background noise reference to standardised 10-metre height wind speed, so it's comparable with Figure 12. So there's no indication in there that the red dots are somehow, apart from those very low-level ones, are somehow inconsistent with the data in Figure 1.
And that's your response to the Mr. Baker, page 110, second bullet point.
That's correct.
The background, 2001 background noises between 7 and 15 dB higher than the 2018 monitoring locations.
That's
the answer is no, it's not.
Yeah.
Thank you. One more point in the 2001 background noise measurements. Mr. Baker covers this again at page 110, paragraph 13.3, final bullet point. It concerns the 20-metre data and the 40-metre data. I think you wanted to comment in particular on the 40-metre data.
Oh yes, this is the wind direction. Wind direction was measured at two heights during the 2001 measurements, and looking at our APP 17.
Yep.
We can show some LiDAR data, but it also.
Hold on, wait till the reporter's got this.
Apologies, racing ahead. APP 17. It's got this blue line at the top. That's right, yeah. So there's some LiDAR data presented there, which I'm not intending to refer to, but I would like to take you to the final figure there, which is Figure 3, which has been included to show a clear fault with the direction sensor at 40 metres, whereby it seems to have been completely restricted within its range of movement, I would say, with the wind vane. The red data, which is from 20 metres height, is what we normally expect to see, with lots of data between 180 degrees and 360 degrees, and a smattering around to the northeast, which includes the direction from both Paul's Hill 1 and Paul's Hill 2 towards Corglass Farm. So the baseline data was entirely consistent with what was required for the assessment.
Keeping that open, looking at Figure 3, we know that Corglass Farm is east of the wind farm site, so the relevant angle is 270 degrees.
That's right.
Thank you. Finally, Dr. Mackenzie, you've been practicing acoustics in relation to wind farms for the period you've stated, and no doubt you've read a great deal of material in the form of evidence, in the form of reports from numerous acousticians and others. Have you come across material of the type produced by Mr. Baker in his inquiry report before? And by that I mean the material in particular in Ground 1, which dwells on background noise and wind shear.
There's certainly a lot of work gone into it. I've never seen anything quite like it. It starts off with a theory which is not so well explained, I have to say. I found it difficult and fairly impenetrable, and things have gradually emerged as time has gone on. But I found it to be very difficult to understand, very complex, very detailed, relying as things emerged on some very, I don't like to be rude, but some fairly tenuous assumptions as its basis. I've never seen anything like it in all the time I've been assessing wind farm noise. Most data that I've been through from others has been based on actual measurements of carefully made under different conditions to present their arguments, but this is purely an interpretation of our data, which I find wholly without basis, I'm afraid.
Dr. Mackenzie, thank you very much. If you'd like to stay there may be some questions for you. So please note I've 2 minutes ahead of time.
Can we just take a 10-minute break before you get on, Mr. Campbell? Go on. Where are we now? Well, can we... According to my computer, it's 17 minutes to 12, so should we come back at 12 o'clock?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Campbell, you'd handed Mr. Trinick an additional document that you wanted to put it, two pages. I don't know, Mr. Trinick, if you've had a chance to look at that, if you're happy with it.
Since I've no idea what it's intended to show, I can't comment. I'm certainly not happy it comes in until we understand what the document is. Now is not the time to do it. We want to go on cross-examination. I'll need to talk to my witness. We need to talk to Mr. Baker probably to find out what this document is and what it's intended to show. I gather it's to do with the grid curtailment because it's about the balancing mechanism. I gather it's intended to show something. My only observation at this stage, apart from saying, no, I'm not happy now, we want to know what it is that it relates to Paul's Hill 1 and compliance, very directly. We have dealt with Paul's Hill 1 and compliance because of the relationship to Paul's Hill 2, but if we're going to start a debate about is Paul's Hill 1 compliant or not, we're not going there on your ruling. That's a warning. Sorry.
I'm, of course, respecting a ruling, and I'm not going there either. These documents are to do with, really, with the condition session and the recently advanced proposition by the applicants that in order to mitigate possible effects, the circumstance may come about that Paul's Hill 1 in its entirety would be switched off in constraint periods, rather than selected turbines or reduction to lower levels. Now, there's only a couple of questions in relation to these documents. It's about whether that is a practical result, a practical measure to be taking to achieve reduction of noise at Corglass, which is all I'm concerned about, for obvious reasons. Now, what I would suggest is, if Malone is not understandably completely happy yet with what we've got, we can discuss this without the presence of Dr. Mackenzie at the lunch break, because he'll be in cross-examination, and I can give such explanation as is sought about the documents. Then he can reach a view which is informed. Would that be a sensible solution?
I think that sounds, yeah. Well, if you want to crack on, thanks.
Thank you. I don't know about crack on, Dr. Mackenzie, but good morning, good afternoon, rather, and I'll try and perhaps move at a slightly slower pace than my learned friend did.
That's probably, I can take responsibility, but that's probably my fault for going too fast.
That's right. Could you put the microphone a little closer to your speaking position, please? Thank you.
Yes, is that okay?
Thank you, yeah. Taking a simple approach first, the residents of Corglass complain of wind farm noise, which can only come from Paul's Hill 1. This inquiry is not about the compliance of Paul's Hill 1, and we're making the assumption that it is compliant at 35 dB.
Yes, that's correct.
That's correct. It would follow then, would it not, that any additional turbines are likely to increase the noise exposure at Corglass.
Yes, that's correct.
Is your position that notwithstanding that increase, the exposure at Corglass will still be within the ETSU limits, the ETSU limit of 35 dB?
No, it's not.
What do you say will be the limit?
The limit will be related to background noise at Corglass Farm.
I beg your pardon, it's my fault, it's a bad question. What do you say will be the exposure at Corglass if Paul's Hill 2 is built, and we make the assumption that Paul's Hill 1 is, which of course I don't agree with, but we make that assumption for present purposes. Let me start again. What will be the overall exposure at Corglass if Paul's Hill 1 is deemed to be operating at 35 and Paul's Hill 2 is constructed?
Well, it's difficult to say what the... I'm not sure what your question means. What will be the exposure? The exposure, there will be more wind farm noise, yes. I could do analysis which would show how much more, and I think we've already done that. In fact, it'll be in the updated noise assessment. In fact,
will the combination of Paul's Hill 1 at 35 and whatever is produced by Paul's Hill 2 still remain within ETSU limits?
Yes, it will. That's the point of our assessment.
And so your position must be that at 35 there is additional headroom for the new wind farm?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that something that is capable of quantification?
I don't understand what you mean. I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
Sorry. Can you measure the amount of headroom available to accommodate Paul's Hill 2 on top of a deemed operating limit at Paul's Hill 1 of 35?
Yes, that's exactly what we've done in our updated noise assessment. Examine the available headroom and shown that there is headroom available for Paul's Hill 2.
And so the simple position is that with the candidate turbines now advanced and the turbines at Paul's Hill 1 operating at a notional 35, there is still room for a tolerable noise limit below 35 or below at Corglass.
No, the noise limits are not 35 or below. The noise limits are the ETSU noise limits, which, as you know, are related to background noise.
I'm not going to take things in quite the order that you've set them out in your precognition because it doesn't really suit me to do so. But can I look first of all at the April noise compliance assessment? CD 7.3.
Yes, I got that.
In the summary, you say this: the results of the noise measurements show that operational noise levels are below the relevant noise limits, although it has not been possible to determine the noise levels from the wind farm.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, leaving aside the reporter's ruling on compliance for a second, does that mean that you've not been able to determine the turbine noise levels from Paul's Hill 1 at Corglass?
Essentially, yes, because where there's large amounts of background noise, it's not possible to determine what the exact contribution of the turbine noise is.
Estimate the contribution.
Not enough to satisfactorily demonstrate to Moray Council that it's operating within its limits.
And so the assumption that it's operating with its limits is understandable for the purpose of this inquiry, but otherwise entirely false as a means of protecting the residents of Corglass.
I don't think that's the case. I think that we have subsequently demonstrated that it's operating within its limits, and we have to assume it's operating within its limits in moving forward on Paul's Hill 2, because we can't go on with an assumption that it's operating outside its limits, because to do so would be deemed to be a failure of enforcement by Moray Council, which we wouldn't want to proceed on that basis.
Well, it'd also be a failure in turbine choice by your clients, wouldn't it? Because you would be super adding to the existing noise exposure from Paul's Hill 1 with turbines which were bound to exceed the ETSU limits.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to rephrase your question, Mr. Campbell. Could you rephrase your question?
I'm going to. I'm just sorry if it wasn't clear. Acknowledging that it's not possible to determine the wind turbine noise at Corglass at present, the reporter has ruled that Paul's Hill 1 must be deemed to be operating at 35 dBA.
That's correct.
Right. We add turbines by building Paul's Hill 2, and you've acknowledged that the noise will therefore be, the turbine noise will therefore be greater.
Yes.
But your position is that notwithstanding that it will be greater, it will still be within ETSU limits.
That's correct, yes.
Right. I'm asking these questions because I just want to be absolutely clear what your position is.
Yes, that's the right approach.
You're not able to determine the noise emanating from Paul's Hill, the turbine noise emanating from Paul's Hill 1 at Corglass. That's what you say in the compliance assessment.
Not by measurement at Corglass, no. We have to carry out measurements elsewhere to determine the compliance because the signal-to-noise ratio is too low because of the background noise from wind in the trees and so forth, as I explained.
And so aren't we stepping into the realms of artificiality if the background noise measurements are made elsewhere at significantly different locations?
Well, unfortunately, it's the only option available to determine the noise at Corglass Farm because of the interference from other noise sources. So that's one of the mechanisms put forward in the Good Practice Guide to, in such circumstances. It's always difficult determining compliance where we have a fixed noise limit, such as that of 35 dB L90 at Corglass Farm, because it is inevitable that there will be background noise interference at some wind speed.
I've not seen you say anywhere in this paperwork or in your evidence that wind turbine noise is not being experienced at Corglass.
No, I wouldn't say that at all.
I wouldn't say that. Now, in the same document, in the same document, in the same place, you say after the parenthesis, background noise levels at the measurement location appear to vary significantly for the same wind conditions at the Paul's Hill wind farm site. Now, I've struggled with that phrase, but I can't understand what it means. So can you help me to understand what it means, please?
If you look, I mean, maybe I should take you to a figure. Maybe if we just go to figure 3, I've just selected that at random. That's where it opened. And we're, of course, very familiar with this figure from Mr. Baker's inquiry report.
Yeah.
There's a huge range of data points. For instance, at 5 meters per second, we have a range of data from 25 dB up to 50 dB. That's what I mean by that.
Something must account for that spread of data.
Yeah.
What you say is that the background noise levels appear to vary significantly for the same wind conditions.
Yes, they do. Well, the same wind speeds, yes.
Well, wind speed or
well, direction, wind direction. There will be other factors that cause that spread of data. It's basically the difference between wind speed on the site and wind speed at Corglass Farm. There's very little relation because of the significant distance
and
between
could the spread of data be accounted for by simply by wind shear.
Yeah.
The difference in speed,
Yeah.
different height, different wind speed at different heights.
Yeah, not simply by that, but that will be one factor which comes into it, sure. That's one of the reasons why we get the spread of background noise data when we're referencing standardised 10-metre height wind speed.
Now, measuring at core glass, have we got data from a 10-metre mast, or are we using standardised data?
We're using standardised 10-metre data.
Right. And so that is derived from hub height wind data, as I understand it, about 2-point-something kilometres from core glass.
That's entirely correct.
That's entirely correct. Does that not feel artificial to you?
Well, not at all, because we want to know what the turbines are doing. Without knowing what the wind conditions are on the site gives us no chance of understanding what the turbines might be doing.
I understand why you want to know what the conditions are on the site, and that that's a measurable value. What I don't find in the workings is any kind of allowance for the 2.3 kilometre distance and the change in altitude between, on the one hand, the 59-metre hub height on site, and on the other hand, the notional 10-metre hub height at core glass.
No, there's no need to make any kind of allowance. The planning conditions refer to wind speed measurements on the site, not to wind speed measurements at Core Glass Farm. The wind speed measurements at Core Glass Farm are largely irrelevant to the measurement of wind turbine noise from the site.
Well, they're not largely irrelevant, are they? Because they dictate ultimately what the noise exposure of the residents of Core Glass Farm to wind turbine noise will be.
Well, no, they don't. The noise exposure is determined precisely, as I just said, by the wind conditions at the site, not by the wind conditions at the measurement location.
Of course, I understand that the genesis of the noise is on site at the nacelle. Of course, I understand that. But that's 2.3 kilometres away. One might ordinarily expect noise to attenuate with distance. And yet, what we have in this case are reports of noise to an intolerable level from this wind farm, and there's only one wind farm, at a distance of 2 and a bit kilometres and at a difference in height. So what I'm trying to understand is, how is it that that noise generated 2.3 kilometres away is apparently reaching this location? How do we account for that?
It's because of the source noise level, because of the stall-regulated turbines.
Yeah. Okay. That answer would mean then, would it, that measurement of noise at core glass for wind turbine noise assessment purposes is largely irrelevant?
No, it's not relevant at all.
If you extrapolate 59 metres,
I think you were trying to clarify your question, but I think he'd got the gist of it anyway. So if we can let the witness answer, and if you think that he's not answering the question, you can have another go.
I'm sorry, no discourse was intended.
I'm happy for you to proceed with your clarification, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you. Well, that's fine. Touché. Quite happy with that. I'm trying to understand what the importance of a derived 10-metre noise level at core glass is to the assessment of the ultimate noise impact.
I don't understand your question. The derived 10-metre noise level at Core Glass Farm is not a thing. The standardised 10-metre height wind speed at which we're required to assess compliance with the noise limit is determined on the wind farm site, and the noise levels are determined at the measurement location for those precise operating conditions.
I'm sure it's my fault. You can determine the noise at the source and you can predict the noise, and you can measure the noise at the receptor.
Yes, correct.
Is the noise at the source and the noise at the receptor the same?
No, it isn't. Of course not.
Of course
I think
not.
You know that.
Yes, of course not. So it attenuates over distance and in accordance with wind direction.
Yes.
Now, the proposed turbines will be closer to core glass.
Yes, they will.
And whilst they may not be stall-regulated turbines, it's equally possible that they may not be quieter than the stall-regulated turbines. And so the noise exposure at core glass at present is going to be greater once these turbines are built.
You've asked me essentially two questions there. The turbines that are going to be installed on Paul's Hill 2, if it goes ahead, will be quieter. We've seen the data on that. We know that stall-regulated turbines are particularly noisy. We've seen the data on that. However, despite that, when you're adding more noise to existing noise, then when you're adding noise to existing noise, then the result is obviously more noise. Yes.
So ultimately, a question of acceptability, which of course is a planning question and not for you, but the question of acceptability is going to depend on the variation or the difference between measured background noise and the two groups of turbines making the combined wind turbine noise. That's right, isn't
Yes,
it?
yes, of course, yes.
Yeah. Isn't this a particularly difficult thing when you have a very quiet receptor location?
Well, no. The ETSU noise limits are designed to assess how quiet the location is and to provide appropriate noise limits to that level of quietness. That's how they are constructed.
So in short, greater noise, but still within ETSU noise limits.
Yes.
That's your position. In the same paragraph, you say, the results of the noise measurements show that operational noise levels are below the relevant noise limits. Is that at the site or at the receptor?
The noise measurements are carried out at Core Glass Farm, and the relevant noise limits apply at Core Glass Farm. So at the receptor.
Thank you. I'd like to move to something else now, please. If I may just have a second. ETSU R97 evolved in the mid-90s. My own friend, Mr. Tunick, was on the working party. I don't know if you were as well.
I wasn't.
Dr. Hayes was, I can't remember. But, and it's survived a number of reviews and is still recommended as a policy document. What is the status of the Institute of Acoustics, GPG?
It clarifies a certain number of matters that aren't considered in ETSU R97, so it interprets them in the light of how things have moved on.
Sorry,
since.
you're not answering my question.
Okay.
I want to know
what the status
I want
was.
the status is, not what it says.
I am describing its status. The status is it prevents refinement of good practice.
I'm not sure that you quite answered the question yet. I don't want to harass you, but where does it stand in the spectrum of officialdom ETSU has a status because it appears in, for example, the National Planning Framework, Scottish SPP from 2014, and other earlier forms of the same guidance. I'm not aware that the GPG does likewise, but perhaps I'm wrong, so can you correct me?
Yeah, before you clarified your question, I was going to say, well, it has the same status as ETSU R97. It's not actually a planning document, but it's referred to in planning guidance. Without referring to it, I wouldn't fall on my sword over it, but I think the online guidance refers to the GPG, so it refers to the ETSU R97 as interpreted by the Good Practice Guide. If you want me to go there, we can check our facts.
No, we don't need to waste time doing that, but the Scottish online guidance is 5 years old, and despite promises made at the time, hasn't had one syllable altered, has it? So it's... Is the guidance that the IOA devised any part of official guidance? Would Mr. Bullier feel obliged to follow it?
Well, it has the same standing as ETSU R97 in that respect. So anybody can, I guess, can say, I don't agree with ETSU R97. They could also say, I don't agree with the Good Practice Guide if they wished, but it would be going against what's clearly mandated by Scottish planning guidance.
Planning guidance doesn't mandate the use of the Good Practice Guide. Good Practice Guide came about because acousticians got together and decided that ETSU needed clarification and published it. It doesn't have any official benediction from, for example, DEFRA or the Home Office or the Scottish Government or anybody else.
Now, you're slightly wrong, if you don't mind me correcting you.
No, that's the point of the question.
It didn't come about because a bunch of acousticians got together and decided they wanted to do it. That was what happened with the 2009 Bulletin article, if you will. What happened with the Good Practice Guide was the DEC at the time, I have no idea what they're called now. I've lost patience with English politics, as I think you know. DEC decided that they needed to clarify certain factors in ETSU R97 and commissioned a report by ourselves to look at ETSU R97 and see how it was being used in planning applications. And the result of our report was they commissioned the Institute of Acoustics to form a working group to produce the Good Practice Guide because they felt that a significant amount of time had elapsed since ETSU was produced and further refinement was needed, particularly in the area of predictions, wind shear, low-frequency noise, all the matters that were brought up in the 2009 Bulletin article, in fact.
Was the GPG actually commissioned by the government?
I'm fairly sure that was the case. I'm fairly sure that the reason the IOA working group was formed was because the Department of Energy and Climate Change, as was, requested that the IOA produce that. We can clearly look into that, but provide you with a more robust answer. I'm aware that it's not.
No, that's clear enough for the moment. No doubt you'll be asked about it in re-examination, and we'll see what the... I'm only asking you these questions because I don't know the answer. And, it may be relevant in making submissions at the close of this inquiry as to what Mr. Bullier must or must not follow, and that's the reason for the question. Did you have anything to do with preparing a noise assessment for the Rothes 2 wind farm? I'm trying to look back on Rothes 2. Yes, I probably did. It's quite a long time ago now. Indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
I seem to remember carrying out background noise measurements at a large number of derelict properties.
As you know, Mr. Baker's conclusions depend to some extent at least upon an understanding of the effect of wind shear on this site, on the Paul's Hill 2 site and at Corglass. the words wind shear don't appear in your precognition or your inquiry report, do you say that it's completely irrelevant to an understanding of noise exposure at core glass?
I'm surprised you say the words wind shear don't apply in my inquiry report, because there's a section which deals with wind shear.
Sorry, in your precognition is what I meant to say.
No.
Yes, it's in the first report, but not the second, I think.
Sorry, the first report, my first inquiry report.
Yes.
No, monitoring. First monitoring.
Oh, sorry. In November 2018, you carried out the first compliance, Hayes Mackenzie carried out the first compliance assessment.
Yes, that's correct.
There's no reference to wind shear there, is there?
I don't know without looking through it, but I probably not.
What I need to get to is an understanding of whether or not the effect of wind shear, as between the height of the turbines proposed now, Paul's Hill 2, and core glass, have any effect on the likely noise impact at core glass.
It depends what you mean by impact. Do you mean predicted noise levels, or do you mean... no, it doesn't have any... insofar as turbine noise is... the source noise level is determined with reference to hub height wind speed, no, it doesn't have any impact on the noise at core glass farm.
Just so I understand your position then, that's fine. Could we turn up your inquiry report, please, and go to I beg your pardon, Dr. Mackenzie, I have an incorrect reference in my notes. I just need a second to find it.
Question 9, say 3.2 of your report.
Can I just get an understanding of, as between the two reports, I think you say somewhere that the second report completely supersedes the first, and then later on when you're answering Mr. Baker's criticisms, you refer back to the first report. Are we to read them both for a full understanding of your position?
No, I don't recall any reference back to my first inquiry report. My second inquiry report completely supersedes it.
Completely supersedes it. And just for the avoidance of doubt, that's 10th October 2019.
Yes, 10th of October 2019.
Yeah, okay. I think that must be...
Yeah, it'll be from the control.
Try and find it, please, will you? sorry for the... Just trying to not cover areas where I don't need to. It takes a moment. Okay. Can we turn to the question of low-speed operation of the existing wind farm,
Yes.
creating greater levels of noise? A matter you told us earlier was discovered by you following the compliance assessment.
That's not entirely correct. We discovered that those turbines were running in low-speed mode, and we discovered high levels of noise, and we discovered the turbines were running in low-speed mode, and we know that those turbines running in low-speed mode at high incoming wind speed causes high levels of noise, so it all joined up.
What's the mechanism for the higher level of noise? Is it the way the blade is feathered?
Yeah, it's the stall regulation mechanism of the blades, the way the turbines are prevented from or are kept to their rated power is because of the design of the blades, and means that they go into stall, which is basically a turbulent condition on the upper surface of the blade, which generates high levels of noise. So they are a problem from that point of view, those design of turbines, why they don't use them anymore.
These are the turbines which were not the consented turbines, but the ones that were substituted by the operator.
No, they are the consented turbines, but they were not the turbines which were assessed in the ES for Paul's Hill 1.
No, and they're not the turbines that were consented either, are they?
Well, there were no...
It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter.
I think, if I may, it's more of a planning and legal issue.
It doesn't matter for the purpose of this evidence. I just want to understand the mechanism of the greater noise coming from the slower speed, which is counterintuitive.
Of course it's counterintuitive, but if you've ever listened to those turbines, you would and understand the stall regulation process, you would understand why, and the fact that it does occur, because I've heard it occur, certainly.
Well, I understand the mechanism perfectly well, thank you, but what I'd like to find out from you, is it all of the turbines or only some of them?
No, only some of the... we don't understand the curtailment which was applied completely, because we don't understand why some turbines are curtailed to low-speed operation and some turbines aren't. The fact is that that's what was happening at the time of those measurements. It no longer happens, as you will have seen from APP, whatever it is that we looked at earlier this morning.
Yeah. So the operator was curtailing the operation of some of the turbines of Paul's Hill 1, presumably on instructions.
That's, again, I'm afraid, I have to clarify, it's not quite true. The operator was curtailing the operation of the turbines, but only some turbines were forced to run at low speed.
I'm sorry, I'll have to run that answer again. I'm sure it's my fault.
No, it may be the way I said it. All the turbines are, during grid curtailment, are curtailed, are operated in such a way as to reduce power. Yes. But only some of the turbines are forced into low-speed operation. I don't know why that is. We have asked, we don't know why, but the fact is that it's the turbines which are forced to run in low-speed operation that cause the problem. Yeah. And that's why that practice has now stopped.
The balancing mechanism dictates total output from a wind farm installation, doesn't it? not output from individual turbines.
No, precisely.
Yeah. So the grid will say to Paul's Hill 1 or its managers, we only need X, and then leave it to Paul's Hill 1's managers to curtail the turbines as they see fit so as to produce X.
I'm afraid I'm only the noise consultant. I don't know how exactly the power for output from Paul's Hill 1 is managed. But all I know is that some of the turbines were being forced to run in this noisier mode, and that's what caused the elevated noise levels. The rest of it is really not of any issue from my perspective.
So you're not in a position to talk to us about or tell us about grid management control, output control, are you?
No.
All right. It's the same thing, isn't it? For a minute.
Yes, of course.
I think we know that's done by placing sound level meters in free field conditions, measuring over a period, recording the measurements, drawing a line through the results.
Yes, that's
And
correct.
so we get an average. And that was done at Corglass on a number of occasions.
Only once.
In 2001, is that,
Yes.
is that the only time?
Well, there have been some measurements during turbine shutdown, which you may say amounts to the same thing.
So 18 years ago, the data was obtained, let's assume correctly, for Corglass when, over what period, sorry?
I think it was 2 weeks. It'll be. We can go to the report if you like.
Is
to
that
find
about
out.
normal, is it?
It was at the time. 2 weeks was. There was. I think in the early days of ETSU, it was a week, and then it became 2 weeks, and then.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that's happened at Corglass this year is the staged, phased felling of the small pine plantation next to the house. I take it you've been there.
I haven't been there recently. No.
Yeah. Did you know that the plantation was felled?
I had heard that it had been felled. Yes.
Yeah. What's that going to mean in terms of background noise?
It's difficult to say without carrying out repeat measurements. I would say.
What does common sense tell you?
Well, it's very difficult to say. As you're aware, the noise from different trees causes different amounts of noise at different distances. Yeah. It's very difficult to say.
But if there are no trees,
if there are no trees, then there's typically a lot less background noise. But
yes.
we know there are still trees there.
Yes, but the plantation has been felled. Common sense tells us, doesn't it, that the background noise will be reduced?
It depends on the level of noise from the other trees, I'm afraid.
Of course.
We can't.
And it depends where in the vicinity of the house you make the measurement. But overall, common sense would tell you that background noise will be increased.
Maybe you could...
decreased, I'm sorry. Decreased.
No, that's right. Maybe you could explain to me where the trees that have been felled are relative to the photograph which we've got there, or relative to some other
well, no, I'm not going to
map or whatever.
I'm not going to do that, because if you've been told that the trees were felled, then one might have expected you to go and assess this for yourself, and you haven't. But I intend no criticism by that. Those are the facts. Now, with a reduction in background noise, assumed by me for the purposes of this question, we're going to have more room, aren't we, for the audibility of turbine noise from the proposal?
If we assume reduced background noise level, which is what you're assuming,
indeed, I'm making
then that's correct.
That's correct. What? Yeah. And that makes this case really very difficult to assess with any confidence, doesn't it?
I don't believe so. I think that the background noise data which we established then can be applied to what's happened now. There may have been other changes at the site, but the overall, as we've seen in the spread of data which has been acquired during the compliance measurements, we can see that there's still a lot of background noise.
Let me just put to you a series of things that we have in front of us which we can be certain about. We've got background noise measurements which are 18 years old. Let's assume they're accurate. We've got 7 new turbines of a different character added to the existing 29 turbines,
Yes.
which are all stall regulated
Yes.
and are not going to be changed.
No.
We've got residents who have complained about noise consistently since Paul's Hill 1 was built. And we've got a reduction in tree cover. That would suggest to me, just as a layman, that the probability is going to be that the noise exposure overall at Corglass is going to increase remarkably. And the only question for the reporter is then going to be is it within ETSU limits or not?
You say that there have been complaints about noise from Corglass Farm since the beginning, since it was first started.
Well, I don't think since the very beginning, but not to the not. I think only following the announcement of Paul's Hill 2. But it doesn't really matter because the evidence, I was going to say the evidence from Mr. Bonzio will be, but he's not giving evidence in this section of the inquiry.
I know I'm not supposed to ask you questions, Mr. Campbell, but I think you misunderstood my question. I understand that the noise complaints only occurred to do with the consideration of Paul's Hill 2, but I wonder how long noise has been troublesome at Corglass Farm. That was my question to you.
Well, I shouldn't really answer your questions, but I think that this is turning into more of a conversation. But I think that since inception,
since it started generating.
Since it started generating.
Well, that was my supposition.
That was your supposition.
Was that noise had been troublesome since it started generating. Now, I don't know when the balancing mechanism, which involved running the turbines in low-speed mode, started, I'm afraid, and I apologise for that because it should have been one of the things that I found out. But as I understand it, as I think I understand it, and we can get clarification from some people who are here today, is that it has always been carried out in that way. And to my mind, and I know Mr. Baker doesn't agree with me, but to my mind, that is the cause of the noise complaints at Corglass Farm, because the noise levels are about 10 dB higher than they should be under those conditions.
So, given that understanding, which is you've come to relatively recently, doesn't this case cry out for a fresh assessment of existing background and a fresh prediction of the combination of Paul's Hill 1 and its stall-regulated turbines with a prediction for the new turbines, the new candidate turbines at Paul's Hill 2? Can a minister sensibly make a decision on the basis of the data that he has?
I think that the assumption of compliance with the planning limit for Paul's Hill 1 doesn't require a new assessment based on new data for Paul's Hill 1, because it's entirely taken into account by the assessment which we've carried out. I believe the baseline noise measurements are entirely fit for purpose. I don't see any reason why, given the spread of data which we see in the compliance measurements, which are down to baseline noise data, I don't see any suggestion, unless you're going to tell me that the trees were only taken down last week, then I don't see any reason why the baseline noise levels shouldn't remain fit for purpose.
It kicks the can down the road of responsibility for A, complaining, and B, enforcing the combination of Paul's Hill 1 operating at a notional 35 and the added noise from Paul's Hill 2. So whatever decision Mr. Bullier makes, unless he refuses the application, there can be no, I'm sorry, not decision, recommendation, I apologize. Whatever recommendation the reporter makes, there can be no certainty at all that at Corglass there will be a tolerable accommodation within the ETSU limits because of all these variables. Wouldn't you not agree?
No, I don't agree. I think that we can be confident in our predictions. We can be confident that the ETSU limits should apply in the same way which we would for any wind farm site. In fact, the reporter can draw comfort from the fact that we're assuming that that Paul's Hill 1 is operating at its planning limits, which is not something which we normally assume. We normally we normally look at cumulative impact by looking at the actual noise level which is generated by a wind farm.
But we're not
and if it's, well, hang on, let me just finish. If it's shown to, if the predicted level is shown to exceed the noise limits, then we assume we show it to be operating at its limits. But generally, a wind farm is predicted to be operating below its limits, and that's what we assume. In this case, we have assumed the wind farm, Paul's Hill 1, is operating at its planning limits for every wind direction and every wind speed, which is a worst case. So we're not, I don't see what you mean by kicking the can down the road. We are, I guess you could say that any consent with planning conditions is kicking the can down the road on that basis.
Well, that's all very well, except for the false assumption in the middle of your answer, which is that what is assumed is a worst case, because we know it's not a worst case.
I disagree. We've carried out the compliance measurements. If the environmental health officer, Mr. Caldwell at Moray Council, is concerned that there are still exceedances of the noise limit, then I'm sure that we'll be hearing from him very soon.
Why consent a wind farm on the basis of a notional tolerance or a notional fitting within certain limits which are known to be wrong?
Well, we don't know them to be wrong, and we have to assume for planning purposes that everything proceeds in an orderly fashion. This may be a legal point that I'm straying into, but I just don't see how we can proceed on the basis of something which is operating, as Mr. Baker puts it, illegally. It just doesn't make sense from a planning perspective to assume something which is not right is going to continue not being right. We have to make sure it's right.
No. Do you mind? I'm sorry, your answer's gone completely out of my head. I was getting signals from Mr. Trinick and a voice on my right.
The only signal I'm making is I think you're in danger of treading over the ruling.
That's why the question was asked as it was.
You want me to repeat my answer?
If you can, I'd be grateful.
I don't think it makes sense to proceed on the basis of something happening illegally, as Mr. Baker calls it. It just doesn't make planning sense to assuming that something bad is happening, and we need to build on that. That situation has to be brought under control, and I believe is under control because of our second compliance measurement report.
Well, I'm tempted to say you would say that, wouldn't you? Because what in fact is happening at Corglass is something quite different from the ruling. Now, I don't want to go into the compliance of Paul's Hill 1 today, just to keep Mr. Trinick comfortable. But the reality is that a planning consent, or a Section 36 consent, has got to take account of the likely outcomes for recipients of noise. And it isn't a likely outcome, I put to you, it isn't a likely outcome that what we will end up with will be within ETSU limits, not without additional data, including additional background noise measurements.
Well, I would say to you, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? Because I have no evidence in front of me no plausible evidence in front of me that Paul's Hill 1 is operating outside of its planning consent, and I have no plausible evidence in front of me that Paul's Hill 2 will not operate within the noise limit specified by ETSO R97.
A convenient time to take a break.
Yeah, I think it would.
I feel I'm making reasonable progress, and I don't expect to be terribly much longer. But I'm sorry, I'm not able to estimate the time. But
It's 1 o'clock, give or take. Do we really need a whole hour? No. No? Good. 45 minutes, 1:45. Okay.
could I think with you, please, about the noise measurements from 2001?
Yeah.
And at the same time, look at the noise compliance assessment of October 2019, which I think tells us what we're going to get.
Yeah. Would you like me to get the original 2001 document out, or can we refer to the...
I don't think it's necessary. I've just got 1 or 2 comments about it. You might not... Yeah, get it out, please.
Well,
yes.
what I was going to suggest was that I get the updated noise assessment out, because that's got the same spread of data, and that might be more appropriate. It's done with the same reference.
That's helpful of you, but thank you. If you could just get the 2001 document as well.
Yeah, okay. And the compliance assessment from April.
I'm just interested in the locations, first of all, in the 2001.
A mismatch of documents. You want the 717, which is the 2001. What was the other document you wanted?
Sorry, 717.
But that's the background noise measurements.
That's the background noise measurements.
What was the other one you wanted?
October 2019 noise
October.
compliance assessment.
Yeah. He was getting April, that's why I thought you better
Oh, sorry, October 2019. I'm so sorry.
got there.
Okay.
I'm just anxious to find out. Ultimately, we end up with your predictions for noise exposure. And you say it's in accordance with ETSO limits. What I'd like to try and find out is the extent to which we have to rely on the 2001 background noise measurements as distinct from other measurements which were done in 2019.
Okay.
Sorry. Perhaps I can put the question another way. Can we, or do you say that we, the 2019 noise measurements, background noise measurements, supersede everything that's done in 2001, or simply serve as a check on it?
I don't seek to use any of the background, the shutdown data that was measured in 2019 or 18. I don't propose to use any of the shutdown data which was measured in 2019 or 18 to inform the ETSO limits, only the 2001 data.
So you're only using the 2001 data?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure it's clear in the report, but I couldn't work it out for myself. Thank you. Now, in the October 2019 noise compliance assessment, at table 1 on page 7, we can see the locations for applicable limits.
Yes, that's correct.
And with respect, the description of near location is not terribly precise. So where were they? Do you know?
We've got the eastings and northings there. And they're also indicated on figure 1.
The nearest turbine we know from Corglass is 2.6 kilometres.
Yeah.
So these are, I don't want to estimate it, but somewhat under 2 and somewhat over 2.5, I would think. Are you happy that these locations are suitable proxies for core glass?
No, they're not a proxy for core glass farm. They are nearer to the wind farm.
Clearly. So why are we using them?
Because we don't get sufficient difference between wind turbine noise and background noise at core glass farm to allow us to establish whether the limits are being met or not.
So what weight does the reporter have to put on location 1 and location 2 readings, simply to identify that there were differences?
I'm not asking the reporter to comment on the compliance issue at all. This is a compliance assessment report, so it's between us and Moray Council.
I'm sure it's my fault. Do the results from location 1 and 2 assist us in understanding what the ultimate exposure will be at core glass farm?
They provide confidence that they provide additional confidence that the planning limit for Paul's Hill 1 will be met, can be assumed to be met at core glass farm, over and above the discussion we had previously about legality of proceeding on the basis of an assumed compliance with the limit. That's just an extra reinforcement to the fact that the limits are being met.
Why don't you use the shutdown data for the ultimate assessment?
Sorry, the shutdown data?
Yes, the shutdown data.
The shutdown data is at core glass farm. This is in the previous measurement report you're referring to, not this measurement report.
Not this one, the earlier one.
Because the shutdown data it occurs under very specific conditions which are not representative of the background noise at that location. And as Mr. Baker's pointed out, the shutdown data or the background data can vary with wind shear. So that subtraction which we would have to carry out is simply not appropriate because there are too many unknowns about the background noise level at Core Glass Farm in respect of the turbines operating at Paul's Hill 1.
As I understand it, the format of the shutdown data is that data is obtained before the shutdown period, during it, and then after it.
Yes, that's
Is that
correct. Yes.
And then comparisons are made.
Those elements are covered, but they're not in this report which you've taken me to.
Indeed not. They're covered in the earlier, but is that general understanding of the mechanism correct?
It can work if there's sufficient margin between the baseline, the background, the shutdown data, and the data with the turbines operating.
Yeah. You read us earlier on in examination in chief about a passage. I'm struggling a little bit to understand its usefulness in the context of what we're all trying to do here, which is find out what the results will be at Core Glass Farm.
The decision was made between ourselves and Moray Council that, in fact, compliance measurements at Core Glass Farm are not going to be instructive in informing whether the limits are being met, and we needed to find an alternative solution, which is provided by the Good Practice Guide, which is to measure at a closer location to the wind farm.
Coming to a view about ultimately an assessment of noise exposure at Core Glass Farm.
Yes, it provided the additional confidence that the limits are met at Core Glass Farm. The limits on noise from Paul's Hill 1 are met at Core Glass Farm.
Because they're met at locations 1 and 2.
Well,
is that what you're
clearly we had to make a correction to the limits to make them relevant to the distance at which the noise was being measured.
And how do you do that?
Well, we predicted the difference in noise between. We calculated the difference in predicted noise level between location 1 and Core Glass Farm. So that gave us how much lower the noise would be at Core Glass Farm. So we corrected the noise limit upwards by that amount and said that was a corresponding noise limit, effectively, which applied at location 1.
So is that exercise simply a function of noise level over distance?
Well, yes, essentially, yes. It's the
Probably
same
a more
as any other
complicated equation
prediction.
than that, but
Yeah, it's a prediction. Yes.
yes. All right, I understand that now. Thank you. Would you turn in the November, I beg your pardon, I keep saying November, October 29 compliance assessment to figures 2 and 3 on page 11? The upper graph is a night hours graph, and the lower graph is also a night hours graph, I think. Could you just explain to the reporter, please, what we're looking at?
Yes, I can. This shows the measured noise levels, which are the grey dots. So as I explained earlier, for some other plot we were referring to, these are the 10-minute noise levels plotted against the concurrent standardised 10-metre height wind speeds.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a best fit curve drawn through the middle of the data.
That's a grey line.
That's the grey line.
Yes.
There are then some noise levels during shutdown, which are the red dots, and there's a similar red line drawn through the middle of that data. And this applies to both charts, by the way. One's for location 1, one's for location 2, which
Yes,
is
I see
further
that.
away.
Yep. And the green line?
And then the green line is the grey line minus the red line, with decibel subtraction applied.
Logarithmic subtraction.
Yeah.
Thank you, that's helpful. Now turn the page, if you would, to page 13. Again, we have two graphs, one for location 1 and one for location 2,
Yes, that's right.
entitled LiDAR 59 meters height wind speeds.
Yes.
And I'd just like to be clear that I understand what I'm looking at here. The dots mean all the same thing,
Yes.
as you've just described,
Yes.
and the green line says calculated wind farm level.
Yes, that's
Sorry,
correct.
calculated wind farm noise level.
Yeah.
Are we talking about Paulsville 1 or 2?
Well, 1, because this is what it is.
Yes.
It's compliance measurements report.
Okay. So is that green line drawn through as a best fit curve? Or
Sorry?
is it a prediction?
And there's no predictions on here. This is purely
This is actual.
The prediction is the only prediction is the difference between the noise level at locations 1 and 2 and at Corglass Farm, which has raised the noise limits to nearly 46.8, I think it is, and 41.8 or something, as you can see.
46.8 is where the green line stops, is it?
No, it's the black line on there,
Or the black line, sorry, yes, of course.
the black dashed dot line.
Can you help me understand why the shutdown data is valid for locations 1 and 2, but not valid for core glass?
Because you can see that this particular chart, which was based on LiDAR, there's a good correlation between the background noise. There's a good correlation with wind speed, so it's valid shutdown data. There isn't the variation in background noise level which we see at Corglass Farm. So there's a coherent fit to the data.
Does that mean that at Corglass Farm there wasn't a coherent fit to the data?
No, that's right. That's correct. That's entirely correct. That's what we're saying. There's a huge range in background noise data for similar wind speeds on site.
Right.
Because of the distance.
Still struggling with the idea that you can use locations 1 and 2 as a sort of proxy to give you confidence, as you put it, for Corglass Farm, which is some distance away.
The confidence comes from the much higher signal-to-noise ratio. Confidence comes from the fact that we can say, yes, this is categorically wind turbine noise, rather than anything which is influenced by background noise.
Right, I see. Okay. Sorry, sir, if you just bear with me a second. I'd like to turn now, if I may, to the question of low-speed operation as generating additional noise, which you've touched on already.
Yeah.
My instructions are that on 4 of the 11 days on which Mr. Bonzio presented sample results of wind farm noise, there was no shutdown.
Yes.
There was no constraint, I beg your pardon, not shutdown. Does that cause you to hesitate about the reliability of the conclusion?
No, it doesn't. I'm not. I'm much more interested in what's happening on the wind farm site itself, because that is where we can see the elevated noise levels. I understand that Mr. Bonzio was still troubled by wind turbine noise on locations when the shutdowns, the curtailment didn't occur, or at least didn't occur according to the REF database. I haven't done any correlations of his observations with our own records of when curtailment occurred. But I understand that there's broad agreement between the two, but there are some periods when it didn't quite tie up. But that is.
Sorry, I interrupted you again. I beg your pardon.
Yeah, what happens at Corglass Farm will be moderated by other factors, not least of which is the background noise level at Corglass Farm will change the perception of noise in any case.
Because 2 people live there.
Yes.
They have a relatively quiet existence.
Yes.
It's not the summer season. Guests are not coming and going. There are no children.
Yes.
There are no animals apart from a couple of quiet dogs.
Right.
And so when you talk about changing conditions at Corglass, it's a little difficult for me to see what you might be referring to.
I'm referring to wind in the trees. Predominantly, that's the source of the only real source of background noise at Corglass Farm, as I understand it from what I've heard from
Referring to wind in the trees.
Mr. Baker.
All right. What do we know about wind speeds at the wind farm when the Bonzios report excessive noise?
I'd need to look back in my records. I can't think where we've done a direct comparison between wind farm wind speed levels and the Bonzios' complaint.
If we have wind blowing on the wind farm and little wind at Corglass,
yes,
we're able to assume a high level of wind shear, aren't we?
Yes.
I mean, one can't be in 2 places at once to experience it.
No. I don't know if you describe it as wind shear, but yes, there is a discrepancy between wind at Corglass Farm and wind on the site. Yes, there is a big difference.
So a high wind, higher wind higher up,
yep.
A low wind lower down.
Yes.
Will give us a high wind shear exponent.
If you want to call it that, yes.
Well, I do want to call it that.
That's fine.
As long as you're happy with me calling it.
We'll go with that for the time being until it gets problematical, if indeed it does.
Now, in those circumstances, what happens to noise propagation from the source?
Well, it doesn't make...
It attenuates over distance, we know that, and that's in the prediction mechanism.
Yes.
We know that Corglass is downhill from the wind farm.
Yes.
And we know that there's nothing in between except the flat ground.
Yes.
So, all right, Let me ask you a daft laddie question. How is it that at Corglass, Mr. Bonzio is experiencing noise when there is little wind, but apparently greater wind speed on the wind farm site?
How is it? Well, because the wind farm is more audible when there's little background noise. That's fundamental to the assessment process.
And is that a product of wind shear?
It's kind of a product of wind shear, but it doesn't play any. It's a product of the difference in wind speed between the turbine height and the house. Yes. So, yes. To answer your question, yes, it is a product of wind shear.
Thank you. Could I take you next? Sorry, just 1 second. Could I take you next, please, to Mr. Baker's recognition? I've probably asked questions for long enough, so I'd like to go through this relatively quickly and find out what you agree with and what you don't,
Okay.
and why.
Okay.
We don't need to bother with number 1 because that's not controversial. From number 2, he says, from extrapolation of monitoring nearer Paul's Hill 1, that's the applicants, have established wind farm noise of 6 decibels above the predicted level. Do we agree with that, Dr.
No.
Mackenzie?
No, I don't agree with that. Because we haven't carried out noise predictions for the period of curtailed operation.
We haven't carried out noise predictions for the period of curtailed operation.
Yes. Yes, we haven't. No.
We've carried out noise measurements for the period,
Yes.
but not noise predictions
Yes.
for future curtailment.
Yes.
Why would they be different?
Because the curtailment is being carried out in a different way now because of the problem we found with that way of curtailing noise from Paul's Hill 1.
Perhaps you can tell us what will be involved then.
The turbines we shut down. I think that's fairly clear from the DB20. APP something.
All of the turbines will be shut down.
I think that's the case. That's what it says.
That's a letter from FORL.
Yeah.
Which is not backed up by any confirmatory document from the National Grid, as I understand it.
So I really worry. We are just simply going about. This is a Paul's Hill 1 compliance exercise we're going through at the moment. We're going well beyond your ruling.
Well,
It is sounding. I mean, the fact remains that there will be consequences for the operator of Paul's Hill 1 if they don't comply with the condition to which they're subject, and whatever way they need to address the condition, whether that's switching them all off, full stop, or not. Nobody has told me anything that suggests, certainly not the council, that the condition is ineffective. So exploring the effectiveness of different methodologies for achieving the limits doesn't seem to be getting us anywhere when I've already said we have to assume, and I think you've agreed with Mr. Campbell, we have to assume that they'll operate it lawfully, whether they have in the past or not. They have to, going forward, we have to make that assumption, because the council's not said that they're incapable of enforcing it.
well, we can make that assumption, sir. If the witness's evidence is that the applicants rely on this letter as a mechanism for dealing with curtailment, that's fine with me. Is that what you're saying?
It's not the way the applicant's dealing with. It's the solution which has been put in place to prevent excessive noise levels during grid curtailment.
In number 3, do you agree with the first sentence? Why not?
Because for the same reason that I don't... Sorry, looking at
I'm looking at
Mr.
Mr.
Baker's recognition. No, I don't agree with that statement for the same reason I don't agree with the statement number 2, paragraph 2.
Turning to number 6, just to ask you a question about the headroom that you say is available. Can we understand that the parameters that lead you to that conclusion are that Paul's Hill 1 operates at 35, that the candidate turbines do not bring the noise, the total noise at core glass above the ETSU limits?
Yes.
Because there is headroom for that to happen.
Yes, yes, that is my position.
Yeah. How do we measure headroom?
With reference to the ETSU R97 noise limits.
It's the amount of room for additional noise. Is that correct?
Yes.
Understanding?
Yes. Sorry if I didn't make that clear.
Yeah. The Paul's Hill 1 is. Yes, right. Thank you. That's fine. I get that. If you look at number 10, Mr. Baker says the applicant has identified no means by which it can assure that PH1 can be constrained by enforcement to operate within its limits in all atmospheric conditions. Can I take it that the preventive mechanism then will ensure that, even though Paul's Hill 2 is operating?
I'm not sure I understand your question about Paul's Hill 2 operating, but I can tell you that if there was if there continued to be, or continued to be is probably the wrong word, if for some reason we were required to carry out additional measurements to demonstrate the compliance we've already demonstrated, and for some reason there was an exceedance, then it would fall upon the, well, not the applicant, but the operator of Paul's Hill 1 to ensure the limits were being met, and those limits would have to be met through control of the Paul's Hill 1 turbines, which would be achieved by, because they don't have the flexibility of pitch-regulated turbines, which would be on Paul's Hill 2, to regulate the noise, it would have to be done by shutting down certain turbines for certain wind directions. So there is a means available for dealing with that if it became necessary, which I don't believe it would.
And you're presumably not able to make any assessment of power loss if that were necessary. That's not your area, is it?
No, that's not my. And as I see it at the moment, it's not necessary. So I wouldn't even begin to start on what we would need to do for noise reasons, let alone what effect that would have on power. Mm-hmm. It's always the case that noise reduction comes at the cost of power reduction. Of
just check if I've got any more questions. If you bear me for a second. No, I think Mr. Campbell covered what I was going to ask you. Mr. Trinick, do you have any further questions?
One or two points, yes, sir, if I may. Just want to get clarification on one point. My first point. It's you were taken by Mr. Campbell to the April 2019 compliance report CD73, and you'd explained that one of the difficulties in terms of paragraph 1.3, what you say there, is that with lots of background noise it's difficult to isolate wind turbine noise. The signal to noise ratio is poor, etc. You say it's subsequently been shown to be within limits. I want to be clear about that because we know that a breach of the limits has been demonstrated, hence the grid curtailment issue and what's been done. Would you classify operation during grid curtailment as normal operation?
No.
So when you say subsequently shown to be within the limits, do you mean in normal as opposed to abnormal operation?
Yeah, in normal operation.
Thank you. Just noting to Mr. Campbell, I'm not going to re-examine on the policy issues. The online guidance is for the inquiry. We can both submit on that. I'll leave it there. That's all right. If, as a result of to ask this actually in light of subsequent questions. Yeah. Two more questions. The first relates to background noise measurements made in 2001. And you drew attention to the evidence of the shutdown measurements made in 2018.
Yes.
Evidence that there was a similarity, the same sort of spread of data as in 2001. I just want to amplify that a moment by going to one or two figures so the reporter knows what to look at in order to evaluate what you've said. If you go to the April 2019 compliance document at figure 3, so we get that in front of you. Have you got a hard copy, sir, though, or are you going to be flipping on the screen? That's 7.3. I think I'm going to ask, sir, that you are past hard copies of one or two, because flipping on the screen isn't going to work when you're looking at background data. You need to be able to see side by side physically. I'm on page 11 of 7.3, figure 3. You also need, if someone wants to make a note of the other two you'll need, it's the background noise measurements of 2001, which is 7.17 at figure 4. And the third and final document is the October compliance monitoring, which is 7.21 at page 11.
figure?
In which one?
721.
Page 11. Figure 2. That's the one, yeah. You there? Yeah, that's good enough. So if you access 721 on screen, I will hand you the other two. I'll wait till people tell me they're there. So to recap, it's 7.3 at figure 3. It's 7.17 at figure 4. And 7.21 at figure 2. I'll wait till Mr. Campbell's there. You sure? Thanks very much. Amplifying what you said to Mr. Campbell, what do these three figures tell you about the continued validity of the 2001 background noise measurements?
Figure 2 shows the effect of having no trees. So there's very little spread in the data.
Sorry, but when you say the effect of having no trees, are you talking about the trees that were removed?
No, these are the measurements made at location 1, which is there are no trees around that location. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. In terms of the levels of background noise, acknowledging its location 1, not at Cordlass Farm, insofar as it's relevant, just answer my question, how do the levels compare?
Sorry, the levels of background noise.
Yes, correct.
Do you mean the overall noise levels,
No, I mean
or do you mean the
shutdown.
levels of shutdown?
Shutdown.
Okay, the shutdown level is around about 30 at the wind speed of 7 meters a second in figure 2.
Yep.
The shutdown noise level in figure 3 is about, well, there's a huge range of shutdown noise levels, hence our problem. But the lowest ones are about 21, 22.
Yep.
And then the background noise levels on figure 4 are difficult to determine from my copy of 717. But if we were to refer to the updated noise assessment, we've got slightly clearer figures which are reference to the same standardised.
Perhaps let me narrow it down.
Okay.
Compare simply figure 3 of 7.3
Right.
and figure 4 of 2001. My question is the general spread of background data shown by the shutdown red dots in figure 3 similar to the spread of background data you see in 2001?
Right, okay. The spread of, apart from the very low data points, around about 21, 22, which we know Mr. Baker says are down to very high wind shear on the site, the rest of the data is broadly within the range of data on figure 4.
Of 2001?
2001, yeah.
I won't take the next point. I'd be leading if I went beyond that point. My final point relates to question of wind shear. I want to be sure that you were entirely following Mr. Campbell's question. He asked you of higher wind shear at the site and low wind, that's what he said, low wind at Cordlass Farm meant high wind shear.
I think I answered yes.
You answered yes.
Yes.
Is it valid to relate local wind speed at Cordlass Farm to wind speed at the site for the determination of wind shear?
Well, no, it was purely in the context of background noise.
Purely in the context of background
noise.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. So that's the re-examination. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Kinsey. That's very good. We'll take a short break. We're now 25 to 3. We'll swap around. I assume, Mr. Campbell, you'd rather have your witness start there for your good ear.
Yes.
rather than having here.
I was wondering if we could agree to take Mr. Baker's evidence in chief today, but reading the precognition, and so that he wouldn't be impaired overnight.
Did occur to me. I know you've got a fair bit for him, Mr. Trinick.
It's 2:30 only, so it would be a bit of an early bath, but
I assume that witnesses and advocates come to the inquiry prepared to crack on with the case, not to have to go away and take further instructions at this stage. I'm sorry, but
it's not about
I think Mr. Baker should be required to give it evidence in chief and not have an early bath, but let's go to the end of the day and hear the evidence in chief.
That's what I was saying. We're agreed.
No, but including all the supplementary questions?
Yes.
I thought you meant just read the precognition.
I'm sure it's my fault, Mr. Trinick, not expressing myself
it's not.
clearly.
I'm sure it's my fault. I apologise if it is.
I think the question is, can we leave your cross-examination until the morning? Excellent. We'll break for 10 minutes, come back about 25 to, and we'll sort the desks out. I'll hand over to Mr. Campbell. I think, Mr. Trinick, you've had a look at the extra documents. You have some thoughts?
Yes, sir. Aggressively, I do object to the production of almost all of them. This is new material. I don't want to hear that we're not taken by surprise. We can experts, we can deal with this, and we're used to dealing with it. That's not the issue. There was a time for the submission of evidence. You've kindly allowed some documents in late. But DB33, well, no, I mustn't call it that. The first of the documents in front of me, I think, is a variation of figure 6-ish, somewhere between figure 6 and figure 17, Mr. Baker's evidence. It's got new material written on it, but we can live with that. I don't mind that coming in. The next one, and the one after, there are two, seems to be records of V10 standardized wind speed against time on the date of the site visit. This is brand new material. I'm not happy it comes in. I don't know where it's going. Excuse me. I don't know when it's going.
On the date of my site visit.
Sorry?
Is on the date of my site visit, or
27th September? Well, whatever site visit it was, I don't want it interpreted now. We have what we have in front of us. And I do object to it coming in. There is a time when new evidence has to stop coming in. Then we've got some LiDAR material, which I do object to. Mr. Baker took issue with LiDAR in his first inquiry report, not the second. He's had ample opportunity, if he wanted, to bring this sort of material into the inquiry to further challenge the LiDAR data or to comment upon it. Now it's simply too late. I'm sorry. The only document we don't mind coming in within this series, which he's produced, is some record of what is happening at other wind farm sites, which we recognise from page 98. It's a Stigler material with a comments column added. And I don't mind that coming in. But as for the rest, as far as we're concerned, and Dr. Mackenzie has looked at it, and Mr. Shepherd has looked at it, they recognise none of it, its provenance, what it's doing, where it comes from. I'm afraid we do object at this stage.
The objection is on the grounds of the late submission of documents. The first thing to say is that none of the material is new, and it serves or would serve only to elucidate evidence that is already before the inquiry. I've been very careful to check that with Mr. Baker, who's the author of the material. The second thing to say is that it is often difficult when one is separated geographically from one's experts to prepare a comprehensive suite of documents with few resources in time. The third thing to say is that the applicants are not coming to this argument quite with clean hands, because their position has changed quite markedly through the course of the run-up to the inquiry, principally in relation to the means by which they will seek to achieve compliance with ETSU at Corglass, which is, after all, my only interest in this case. Now, a solution to the irresoluble dilemma between Mr. Trinick, my learned friend Mr. Trinick, and myself is for you not to reach conclusions about these documents, but to hear the evidence, but under reservation that you may not consider it. In other words, this happens in courts all the time, where evidence is admitted pro tem until we see whether it's relevant to the issues, and it fits with the evidence that's already before you. I do understand time limits, and I do understand sometimes that evidence has to come in late. Both sides have done it in this case. It's not desirable, but nevertheless, it's sometimes not avoidable. So somewhat throwing myself on my sword, I would ask you to admit it. If Mr. Trinick and I were not experienced in this field of inquiry, then my response might be quite different, but we are.
Just allowed to respond briefly on that. Whether this material relates to something that's already been produced, I don't know. All I can tell you is that when my two experts have looked at it, they say, what's this? And that's all I can say further to you two at the moment. I'll make a suggestion at the moment, but let me just answer the other points. I'm sort of unimpressed with the resources point. We have Queen's Counsel and an expert witness. I'm sorry, they can prepare. He is experienced, very experienced. We can prepare for inquiry the same as we can. So far as the compliance, our change of tack on compliance is concerned, well, that's Paul's Hill 1 compliance. It's not to do with Paul's Hill 2. It's not to do with this inquiry. And as for hearing pro tem, obviously, so with greatest respect, once you've heard the material, it's very hard to banish it from your mind, and I'm not impressed by that suggestion. So my suggestion is this, that if Mr. Campbell wants to maintain his request, I have the greatest respect for him. I'm not going to say, just go away. I'll say at the end of today, I think he and Mr. Baker need to explain to my witness how it relates to existing material, and then I can take, and it's for me to take, the final view on what to say to you about admissibility.
I'm obliged. That's certainly a way forward.
Thinking in terms of timing and how that fits with how you're trying to present your case, as Mr. Trinick says, I can't unhear things that I hear, or you appreciate I'm at risk of having taken something into account or not taking something into account when it is before me, or appears to have been before me. But just in terms of the timing, as I don't know, apart from that very brief description, of what these documents are, or what they say, or to what extent they are new or not. And I don't know how you intended to weave them into what your witness will be covering this afternoon, or whether they can be left entirely to one side until what Mr. Trinick has suggested can take place, and you actually have a discussion as to what their scope will be and what reliance you're placing on them and what they are, in fact. Can that be left until the morning?
It could be left till the morning, or it could be done after we close at the end of today. You appreciate they're not my documents, they're the experts' documents, and it would be necessary for him to explain how they relate to existing evidence, because I don't give evidence in proceedings of this kind. I'm quite happy to postpone a decision, or ask you to, join in asking you to postpone the decision until we've had that conversation. Opening the case in this section of the inquiry for Mr. and Mrs. Bonzio, can I introduce to the inquiry Mr. David Baker, who is a chartered engineer. Mr. Baker, you should have in front of you your inquiry precognition and report. With apologies for the slight stramash over the last half hour, could I ask you, first of all, to introduce yourself briefly, and secondly, to read your precognition, and I will endeavour not to interrupt you.
Fine. First of all, please put your hands up if anyone at the rear cannot hear me. Fine. Excellent. Good. I'm David Baker, chartered civil engineer with wide-ranging experience on major projects worldwide. And on this case, I'm the noise consultant to Fiona and Jörg Bonzio, my stepdaughter and son-in-law. I've applied my 47 years of engineering expertise, to forensic examination of the reasons for the wind farm noise at Corglass. I present what I consider a cast-iron case why, on noise ground, Scottish Government policy mandates that consent should be refused for Paws Hill 2 extension. Reasons are: 1. The applicant and operator have confirmed and admitted excess wind farm noise from Paws Hill at times. From extrapolation of monitoring near Paws Hill 1, they have established wind farm noise of 6 dB above the ISO 9613-2 predicted level. This agrees with my findings of an average of 6 dBA in excess of ISO 9613-2 based on noise monitored at Corglass. It also agrees with Swedish research findings from long-term wind farm monitoring. In certain atmospheric conditions, wind farm noise of 6 dB above predictions means that, on average, PH1 noise exceeds its consented limit at standardized 10-meter height wind speeds of 7 meters per second and above. A wide spread around the average means wind farm noise also exceeds the limits at speeds as low as cut-in speed. FORL installed unlawful turbines producing wind farm noise 5 dB above the consented limit. Wind farm noise is therefore 12 dBA above the limit when the turbines are operating at their rated speed. High wind shear means these levels correspond to 10-meter height wind speeds less than 10 meters per second, the stipulated ETSU-R-97 criterion. Under similar atmospheric conditions, average PH2 wind farm noise would exceed predictions by 6 dBA. The applicant's explanation for excess wind farm noise of low-speed operation during energy-constraint periods is conclusively debunked. After over 6 months of monitoring in 2 separate studies, the applicant still has no explanation and therefore no means of rectifying the problem. PH1 exceeds its consented limit, therefore there is no headroom for PH2 to utilize. The applicant argues it must be assumed that PH1 will be controlled by enforcement and PH2 is a separate wind farm that can have higher limits. Scottish Government policy supports neither the classification of PH2 as a separate wind farm nor the imposition of higher limits. I've established unambiguously that the excess wind farm noise occurs during conditions of high wind shear and thermal inversions. This is consistent with acoustic theory and Swedish research findings. In my opinion, the public are inadequately protected by a regulatory regime that relies on the EHO being advised by acoustic consultants employed directly by the wind farm operator for investigating wind farm noise consent breaches. The IOA GPG recommended method of evaluating wind farm noise is to plot both ambient and background noise against standardized instead of the actual 10-meter height wind speed which ETSU stipulates. PH1 noise monitoring evidence shows conclusively that the GPG method obscures reality, with acousticians following it unable to differentiate known wind farm noise from background wind-induced noise. This method is not fit for purpose. The applicant has identified no means by which it can assure that PH1 can be constrained by enforcement to operate within its limits in all atmospheric conditions. Furthermore, as pH2 would produce emissions circa 6 dBA above the ISO predicted levels, it has no means of assuring that cumulative noise from pH1 and pH2 would comply in all atmospheric conditions with the inappropriate consented limits it proposes. Even in the applicant's artificial enforced pH1 and higher limits scenario, average wind farm noise from pH2 would exceed the limits at all standardized 10-meter, that's VH10, 10S, speeds above 6 meters per second, and some wind farm noise would exceed from cut-in. Excuse me just a moment, getting a little dry. Thank you.
You read that as VH10. Did you mean to read V10S?
Sorry, I meant V10S.
V10S.
Yeah. Right. pH2 cannot be granted consent. To do so fails all the required tests of precision, enforceability, and reasonableness in the circumstances required under Scottish Government policy by both ETSU, R97, and Scottish Government Circular 4, 1998. The evidence in my inquiry report is comprehensive, consistent at all stages of the investigation, and scientifically and logically derived. I break new ground in deriving a valid background noise relationship with the 2018 noise measurement location from both shutdown and operational data. I use Hayes Mackenzie's own noise and hub wind speed data, plus sound mathematical and scientific calculations to provide a clear explanation for what residents experience. Everything fits. Residents' observations, core glass noise monitoring data, additional monitoring near the wind farm, and Swedish research results from monitoring 2 wind farms over a 2-year period. To a scientist or engineer thinking logically and independently of the now discredited IOA GPG approach, QED, i.e. the matter is indisputably proven. Understanding the lessons from monitoring pH1 is crucial to consideration of consent for pH2. If you don't understand the first, you cannot understand the second. The inquiry is intended to determine those matters that the parties are unable to agree upon. Hayes Mackenzie have provided no criticism of any of the scientific and mathematical approaches in my inquiry report, so I must conclude they have been unable to find fault with my conclusions. Contrast this with the applicant's investigations. Hayes Mackenzie failed to address the evidence and investigate it scientifically. After 12.7 weeks of monitoring, Hayes Mackenzie were unable to conclude anything on the core glass monitoring, vaguely blaming differences in wind conditions between core glass and the wind farm. They concluded the results were ambiguous, yet felt able to assert there was no evidence of excess wind farm noise. This arguably unprofessional result managed to miss not only noise from unlawful turbines that produce predicted cumulative noise 6 dB above the consented limit, but also the effects of thermal inversion that amplifies the predicted noise to 12 dBA on average, up to 23 dBA, typical upper limit, above the consented limit. After further monitoring closer to the wind farm, Hayes Mackenzie concluded there was evidence of excess noise. This matched what I assessed from the core glass monitoring, but Hayes Mackenzie attributed this to low-speed turbine operation during energy constraints. I show the noise during these periods to be a little different to that during normal operation. Had Hayes Mackenzie checked the facts, they would have found energy constraints coincided with only 4 out of the 11 days when the Bonziers noted wind farm noise at core glass. Thus, after over 6 months of monitoring, Hayes Mackenzie and the applicant have proven unable to distinguish wind farm noise from wind noise. And I'll interject here. I use the term wind noise throughout for background noise, for the simple reason that in this exceptionally quiet, remote area, that is all the background noise you get. And I think Dr. Mackenzie has already commented on that. So, they've proven unable to distinguish wind farm noise from wind noise or identify the conditions that cause it. The applicant argues that PH2 should be granted consent on the entirely theoretical basis that the unlawful PH1 will be controlled to 35 dBA by enforcement. The onus for this is meant to fall on a hard-pressed EHO. He has to deal with an applicant operator that still does not know how to do this after exhaustive study. He is meant to rely on a noise consultant who has proven unable or unwilling to assess the facts in a scientific manner, remains wedded to the emphatically discredited IOA GPG method, and produces biased or unprofessional assessments. My scientific and engineering-based evaluation will stand independent scrutiny by any engineer or scientist not committed to the IOA GPG method. The latter is fundamentally flawed and illogical. I consider my evidence clear, logically presented, and conclusive. An anomaly is the LiDAR data, the LiDAR wind shear values. I've highlighted that something appears wrong, but have been unable to discern why. The applicant has offered no explanation. I present evidence showing that Hayes Mackenzie are, in my opinion, either biased towards the applicant's interests or lack the degree of competence required adequately to recognize and investigate complex wind farm noise in an impartial manner. John Maynard Keyes said in defense of altering his position, "When my information changes, I change my mind. What do you do?" I look forward to hearing what Dr. Mackenzie does. We've already heard a bit of that, I think, today. From Hayes Mackenzie's inquiry statement, apparently nothing, despite my detailed evidence in my report. Compelling evidence in Rep 2 ought to make it. Hayes Mackenzie's manipulation of the wording in ETSU R97 and other questionable statements are too numerous to address adequately here. I must leave addressing them in full until the inquiry. Hayes Mackenzie's inquiry statement, unfortunately, contains disingenuous statements. In 7.1, Hayes Mackenzie states the ES noise assessment showed SWT 2.3 82 turbines meet the consented limit. A falsehood disguised by omission. The SWT 3-82 CS turbines, and I'll explain what those are, in the AI produce 25% higher emissions than the VS versions assumed in the ES. VS stands for variable speed, we've already heard about that, and CS stands for, I think, constant speed. It could also stand for Combistor, but I believe it's constant speed. 7.2 and 7.3 of the inquiry statement make no mention of this change, blithely referring to PH1 turbines operating at their consented limits. This disingenuity alone reinforces the indications of bias in my evidence report, section 12. The overriding duty of an expert witness is to provide independent, impartial, and unbiased evidence to the court or tribe. I submit that the applicant's expert witness has demonstrated clearly that he cannot be relied upon to give impartial advice to inform this inquiry. To compound the above, Hayes Mackenzie present new calculations that omit the 2 dB uncertainty margin they normally add to warranted sound power level for uncertainty. Hayes Mackenzie's inquiry statement concentrates on my earlier reports and pays little attention to the evidence I now present, instead terming the analysis dense. These earlier reports with earlier stages of knowledge accumulation are not relevant to my evidence, except where I quote third-party evidence therein, or iPhone monitoring data. Experience moves on, and mine did. Limited comments are, A, that natural power and FORL would not know the 30% noise difference between variable speed and CS/combistol turbines. Sorry, I missed the that at the beginning. That they would not know this difference is not credible. Noise is a function of tip speed, which is 73 meters per second, not the 60 meter per second traditional limit for offshore turbines. And I give the reference for that in a footnote.
I'm sorry, you've read that as offshore. Did you mean offshore or onshore?
I did mean onshore, so
Yes.
I'll repeat that. So noise for the turbines actually installed, which are noisier than was declared in the environmental statement as candidate turbines, upon which permission for Paul's Hill 1, a consent was granted. So what I'm saying here is that the noise level, which is a function of the tip speed, is higher. And one of the reasons, not the sole reason necessarily, but one of the reasons it's higher is the tip speed was 73 meters per second, which is higher than the 60 meters per second traditional limit for onshore turbines. And if you'll forgive me a minute in interrupting this, the footnote explains the reference for that, which is a paper by Leludas and et al. And one of the joint authors is from Siemens, so I think we can take it. He knows what he's talking about. In 10.2, Hayes Mackenzie continued to conflate actual and standardized 10-meter height wind speeds, either deliberately or in ignorance. There's a huge difference between the two. And the consented conditions are written in terms of actual. Evidence Report Revision 2 provides new compelling evidence. The supposed legal advice in 11.2 is an assertion only, with no convincing supporting argument to overturn my assessment of Scottish Government policy. That the Moray Council may have been swayed by such argument is, with respect, immaterial. Applicants and developers can be extremely persuasive. Regretfully, the logical change from the ETSOR 97 method to the IOA GPG method, relating all noise to standardized 10-meter wind speeds, suits the wind industry because, as I've shown conclusively, it obscures the reality of excess wind farm noise under conditions of thermal inversion. Even without thermal inversion effects, ignoring the reality of high wind shear results in erroneously high values of background wind noise that invalidate derived wind farm noise. I've established unambiguously that pH2 is an extension of pH1, consistent with the applicant's environmental statement and with its application to the ECU, not the Moray Council. This does matter. I show clearly that under Scottish Government policy, the bonzios are entitled to rely on the 35 dBA extant, that's existing, consented limit. Yet again, the applicant's arguments are disingenuous. Once noise limits are established for a wind farm, by agreement with the local council and endorsed by Scottish ministers, residents have a right to rely on those conditions as fixed. The decision has been. ETSOR 97 is very clear on the conditions for further wind farm development and the requirements for cumulative noise to remain within the stipulated limits. Whether the addition is an extension or a separate wind farm. The limit chosen is not a movable feast to be decided on at the whim of a developer, as the applicant attempts. I submit that the applicant's expert witness discredits himself by making disingenuous statements biased towards the applicant, ignoring the strong scientific evidence in my evidence report, which he avoids at all costs, diverting to less relevant issues where he can, compounding clear errors of the GPG by scientifically illogical argument in his inquiry statement, and failing to identify and correctly attribute wind farm noise when I do. I commend to this inquiry the impartial, scientifically rigorous assessment in my evidence report. This establishes clearly that PH2 consent should be denied, as it fails to comply with Scottish Government policy when properly interpreted. Thank you. That's my recognition.
Thank you. Can I just ask you to clarify one thing for me?
Yeah.
Turn back to paragraph 25 of the precognition. You have that?
Yeah, I'm just getting there. By the way, I would hate anybody to think I'm nervous facing this august body of people, but I do have something called benign tremor, which I inherited from my grandfather, and particularly when adrenaline is high, it gets a bit worse, so you'll have to excuse me at times.
Thank you for that. Did you find paragraph 25?
Yeah, I'm going
please?
back to it. That's my right hand thing up at the moment. Okay, yeah, I'm there.
Little e,
Yes.
there's a reference to paragraph 11.8.
Yes, that is...
Can I take it that that's in Hayes Mackenzie's inquiry
inquiry
statement?
statement? Yes.
Inquiry statement.
Hopefully I've got that right, yes.
Thank you very much.
That's what it's meant to be.
Thank you. Now, you've produced a series of PowerPoint slides without text, except descriptive of what they are.
Yeah.
And so, whilst we wait for Mr. Bullier to relocate himself, I wonder if I can ask you to introduce these, remembering, please, the virtues of brevity.
I certainly will attempt to remember the virtues of brevity, and unfortunately, as I have commented to my counsel, this is an extremely complex subject, and there are some things that are both complex and new, which my presentation, my way of analyzing all of this is new. For that reason, there's a limit to how much brevity one can actually embark upon.
That, and I'll stop you. I think you're... let's start with the first slide, which is obviously introductory. Yes?
Yes.
And the second slide.
Right. So these slides are all my figures from the inquiry evidence report, allocated slightly in places, such as I would do verbally. And the figures are provided in order to give additional clarity. You cannot explain something like this just in words. So the essence of it is a new approach to discerning wind farm noise from background noise. And as I say, the background noise, I'm terming wind noise throughout. And what is at the heart of this is wind shear. And if I can just pause a moment to explain to non-technical people what wind shear is. You've got wind blowing at height.
Just a minute, Mr. Baker, please.
I think we could invite chairs up closer.
Yes, Mr. Barlow is very welcome to come and sit here if he wishes. I don't care what you say. You want to, no.
Oh yeah, his camera needs to capture the screen, I think. So, yeah. Okay, so you've got wind blowing at speed at height, and within the original ETSU, and it refers to, it gives you a formula, and it refers to surface roughness. And basically all this is, and all wind shear is shear of any form is friction. It's stopping something moving. That's what shear is. And basically as the wind tries to go across the ground, that slows it down. In essence, that's what it is. So the wind speed is going very fast up at the hub height, but down near ground level, it's slow.
Mr. Baker, I
Yes.
really want you to talk to the slides, please.
I will do, but we agreed there was a precursor to
Yeah,
explain what we're talking
I know.
about.
Yeah, I want you to talk to the slides, though, and tell us what we're looking at, please.
There's another point here. This is not one of the slides. Well, we have the slides we've been presented with, and we have checked every one, and this is not one of the slides. It is, we've discovered, page 39 from the inquiry report, figure 2, yes, with more material added to it. So this is not previously, no, Mr. Baker. It is not previously submitted material. This matters. We cannot be expected to absorb electronically only. We haven't got hard copies of this material which is now coming forward. That is unacceptable.
May I comment on that?
On our part, I'm not able to find electronic communication with my learned friend or his instructing solicitors sending this PowerPoint presentation. And so the objection that has been made has force, and we have to see, or I have to see if there's a way to overcome it. I would clearly like to present a case which I have given advance notice of, except in my failure to send the PowerPoint presentation. I have sent a copy to Ms. Martin in the last few minutes, so my learned friend now has it, although not in paper form. However, that isn't a complete answer because it may just be objectionable on grounds of lateness and or novelty. So may I respectfully suggest that my learned friend takes a look at it, that you adjourn, takes a look at it, and lets me know, he knows where I can be reached, lets me know what his final word on it is. I'm fighting this battle from a position of little strength at the moment because I cannot explain why this has not been done. So I apologize to the inquiry and yourself, sir, because this is most regrettable. I think in my 200 or so planning inquiries, this has happened once before. But it wasn't with Mr. Trinick. And so what can I say except I'm sorry.
As always, Mr. Campbell's very generous, and thank you for that. You know, these things happen. I'm not going to make a big fuss about the fact it's happened. I have to make a fuss about what we do now. I have no idea what's on the rest of those slides. What I do know is on the first slide, which has appeared, it may come initially from the inquiry report, but new material has been added electronically to what is in the report, so there is new material. I don't know if there's new material on any of the other slides. I'm not trying to be, I don't want to be obstructive. If having looked at the new material, which we will, there is limited, if we having looked at the slides, which we will, there is very limited new material and some of the figures are the same as in the inquiry report. I can't claim prejudice. I complain about all sorts of things, but not that. And I don't want to stand in the way of material that's already in. I don't want to stand in the way of Mr. Baker speaking to it, because that's where he's chosen to present his evidence, and he must be allowed to present his evidence. But if there's new material, I can tell you now, there's a lot of new material, we're going to object. And I would expect that objection to have considerable force in the circumstances whereby his witness is giving evidence, mine has given evidence. I can't put these points back to Dr. Mackenzie. He's been and gone. We are prejudiced if there's new material which I need to tackle. So we'll do our best. Again, I'm grateful to Mr. Campbell. Extremely fair approach. Let's see what it says. I don't know where we go from here today, I have to tell you, but
It's going to take Dr. Mackenzie a while, I guess, to go through all of these extra slides to work out what's in them and what he hasn't seen before. That's going to be an overnight job, I would have thought.
Job, and it also puts in prejudice finishing tomorrow, unfortunately, because we're going to, in chief, will now continue, presumably, if we start at 9:30 until 10:30ish, or maybe cross-examination start at 11, and we're not going to get through. So, crying over spilt milk is never any good. It's happened. Let's move on. Let's have a look at it and see where it goes.
I mean, yeah, I think we can't do any other than that. I think we'll adjourn for today. Start 9:30. Is that a problem for you or your witness, Mr. Campbell? If we start at 9:30, no. We'll start at 9:30 and see where we are with the slides and take it from there.
I think 37 slides. 37, whereas we were submitted 9. And you have 9. 9 takes a certain amount of time, 37 takes a long time. I'd like a clear estimate of how long in chief is going to take. Not because I care when the inquiry ends particularly, but because we're all going to travel south to Edinburgh at some stage, and I'd like to make arrangements accordingly.
That at the moment, but I could probably do it in the course of the early evening. And I can communicate with you. And not with you, sir, out of hours. But obviously I'll share the communication with you in the morning. But
I don't know what, if, I don't know what these extra slides are or how critical they are to you, but I'll leave that to you to investigate, and we'll adjourn now and back at 9:30 tomorrow. Thank you.
Obliged to you and my own friend.